Mihama Ariaki, an 18-year-old adventurer from the Gronheim Kingdom, is kicked out of his party by his comrades. Surprisingly, he doesn't seem sad and even looks relieved. This greatly annoys the party leader, Harunoa Bibiya, who is irritated by Ariake's indifferent attitude about being kicked out. Bibiya, the party's leader, is a young warrior and the hero chosen by the holy sword Ranguras, a weapon said to have the power to destroy the demon lord. Bibiya also possesses masterful swordsmanship skills. Bibiya reminds Ariake that he is being kicked out of the hero's party. Two other party members, a girl named Delia and a young boy named Elga, also support Ariake's departure. Delia is a female fighter who can enhance her strength with magic and possesses an unstoppable attack called the Blessed Punch. Elga, widely known by the title Shield of the Kingdom, boasts incredible strength, magic resistance, and an impenetrable defense with his giant steel defense skill. Another party member, Parara, a mage, bluntly tells the group they don't need someone as useless as Ariake. It's rumored that Parara's magical power surpasses the Demon Lord's by 10,000 times, and she is hailed as mankind's trump card thanks to her archer-mage skill. Bibiya sides with Parara and informs Ariake that it's too late to beg to stay. However, Ariake isn't bothered, packing his things and preparing to leave, which only infuriates Bibiya further. The final member of the party, Saint Alicia, finally appears and says she has been waiting for this moment for a long time. Ariake is kicked out of the party, and he thinks of it as a blessing from the gods. Alicia is a legendary saint with incredible healing powers, capable of even resurrecting the dead. Not only is she famous in her own country, but she is also known throughout the world for her stunning beauty. Ariake doesn't understand why Alicia seems to dislike him. When they were children, she used to follow him around quietly, though she was very shy and never spoke. But over time, she changed. All the members of the hero's party, including Ariake, were childhood friends from the village of Rittenday. Ariake believed that their close relationship was what bound them together as a team. But now, he's being pushed out, simply because their feelings have changed. Ariake asks Bibiya why he's being kicked out of the party, and Bibiya replies that it's because Ariake lacks special skills like offensive or defensive magic. Bibiya claims that all Ariake is good for is protective magic during exploration and making antidotes, which, according to Bibiya, anyone can do. The group then takes turns criticizing Ariake's abilities, and though he tries to defend himself, Alicia interrupts and tells him to leave, saying this party isn't the right place for him. Ariake agrees to leave, but before he does, he embarrasses Bibiya by revealing that he has athlete's foot. Before Bibiya can react, Ariake quickly runs away. As a child, Ariake had always dreamed of being chosen by the Oracle to be a reserve member of Bibiya's party until the right time came, which is why he joined them. Now, alone and no longer a member of the party, Ariake decides to head to the town of Alti, a place they had visited before. He felt that the people there were friendly, and that he might be able to live a peaceful life there. While packing his things, Ariake worries about his former party members, who always relied on him to manage their inventory and prepare everything, as they were not good at such tasks. Then, Ariake admits to himself that traveling alone can be fun sometimes. Sometime later, he recalls how the Oracle had approached him and was told by the old man that he must support Bibiya and his childhood friends until the right time came, to prevent them from dying an early death. Ariake reminisces about the skills he received from the Oracle, including the ability to enhance weapons and armor, control time, speeding it up or slowing it down, boost recovery abilities, and a special skill to use all these powers effectively. Ariake never attacked openly. He always fought for his party from the shadows. While most people can check their unique skills using the judgment option, whenever someone tried to view his skill board, it would only display useless skills to make him seem ordinary and hide his true abilities. He used a hidden ability to make certain skills invisible once they reached a certain level. Ariake feels frustrated that he couldn't show Bibiya his real skills, but then he decides to let it go, as it wouldn't change anything now that he's been kicked out of the party. Suddenly he hears a voice in his head, crying and pleading for help. Ariake is surprised that someone could reach him despite his protective magical barrier. This person mentions that they are suffering from an irremovable curse, and begs Ariake to end their life. Ariake is annoyed that this person who just started talking to him would make such a strange request. He firmly refuses and suggests they find someone else for help. However, the voice continues to plead one more time. mentioning its pride as a member of the dragon tribe. This piques Ariaki's curiosity, as it's hard to believe that a proud race like the dragon tribe would seek help from a human with such a request. Ariaki understands the voice's situation but still refuses to take the life of someone he barely knows. However, he said that if the voice truly needed his help, it should provide more information. Ariaki considered the request and finally agreed to help. He began his journey to find the source of the voice. Along the way, a giant centipede attacked, but he easily defeated it with his pest control skill. As he continued his journey, Ariaki thought about the dragon tribe and hesitated to fully trust the voice. He recalled that dragons only submit to humans after being defeated and acknowledging their strength, which made it hard for him to believe they would ask a human for help. Doubt began to creep in, and Ariaki suspected that someone else might be behind the cry for help, with malicious intent. He decided to investigate the area and eventually discovered a sealed dungeon surrounded by many lifeless bodies. Ariaki figured these corpses were likely thieves who had died trying to break through the locked door in search of treasure. He considered breaking the door down, but quickly realized that could lead to unforeseen problems. So he decided to clear the area and think things through. Suddenly, a strange man holding a spherical object appeared behind Ariaki, advising him not to be hasty. Things got even weirder when the lifeless bodies began to rise. Ariaki quickly realized the object in the man's hand was the necromancer's orb, capable of controlling the dead. The man confidently confirmed that it was indeed the necromancer's orb, and proudly declared that he had taken it from someone. Ariaki rebuked him for resorting to such a cowardly trick, but this only angered the man. He threatened to turn Ariaki into a zombie. The zombies moved in to attack, but Ariaki quickly activated his restoration skill, causing all the lifeless bodies to crumble into dust. The man was stunned by Ariaki's power and asked who he was. Ariaki humbly replied that he was just someone who'd been kicked out of the hero's party for being good at carrying things. The man stood there, dumbfounded, unable to believe that someone like Ariaki could unleash such a powerful attack. Ariaki corrected him, explaining that it wasn't magic, but his restoration skill, which has the ability to return things to their original state. Zombies turned back into corpses and decaying bodies turned to dust. The man, frustrated, insisted that he'd never heard of such a skill before. Before he could react, a zombie suddenly grabbed him and pulled him down from the rock he was standing on. Ariaki warned that the decaying zombies needed something to replace their decomposing bodies, which was the reason for the attack. He pointed out that since the man was using the necromancer's orb, he should have anticipated the consequences. The man screamed as the zombies tore him apart and devoured him. Ariaki decided to focus on getting into the dungeon. But then he changed his mind and used his shapeshift skill. Shapeshift is a skill that allows the user to change their form into anything they desire. Ariaki transformed himself into a mole, using its burrowing ability to sneak into the dungeon without breaking the sealed door, and he succeeded. Once inside, Ariaki was amazed by the dungeon's immense size. It looked like a high-level dungeon far beyond what average adventurers could handle. In this world, adventurers are ranked from E to S, based on their combat power and monster-slaying records. Most people are ranked B or lower, but there are exceptions like Bibia and Alicia, who are both S-ranked. As for Ariaki, he was ranked C, not because the ranking system was inaccurate, but because he always kept his true skills hidden. His thoughts were interrupted when two gargoyle statues in the dungeon suddenly came to life. They called him an intruder and asked if he intended to release the Red One of Calamity. Ariaki assumed this Red One was probably the dragon that had summoned him here. Realizing Ariaki had no intention of leaving, the monsters moved in to attack. Ariaki observed their incredible speed and apparent power, enough to destroy an entire nation. However, as they drew near, Ariaki activated his atmosphere manipulation skill, turning the surrounding air into an impenetrable barrier, making their attacks unable to reach him. Even so, one gargoyle managed to break through the invisible wall, continuing its assault. But as they pressed their attack, they suddenly realized Ariaki had vanished. He suddenly appeared behind one of the gargoyles, clicking his tongue in disappointment and asking how they could fall for such a basic trap. Before the gargoyle could even react, Ariaki swiftly lopped off its head with a powerful slash, sending it flying. Stunned, the second gargoyle scrambled back and took to the air, nervously demanding how Ariaki could have defeated a guardian so quickly. Ariaki replied that just because these creatures look down on humans doesn't mean they're superior. He continued to taunt the gargoyle, provoking it to attack. When it lunged, the attack didn't harm Ariaki at all. Instead, it began to affect the gargoyle itself. Ariaki explained that during the first attack, he had used his atmosphere manipulation skill, creating a wall of illusory atmosphere that made them believe they had an opening to strike. Then, he used that same illusion to counter, turning their own attack back on them. Ariaki revealed that he had been in control of the situation from the very beginning, and with that, the gargoyle dissolved into dust. Afterward, he continued deeper into the dungeon. Recalling that dungeons were like living beings with minds of their own. They usually summon monsters when an intruder appears, trying to absorb their magic to grow stronger, just like antibodies in a body. Dungeons also use treasure chests as bait, but they're really just traps. As Ariaki ventured deeper, he entered an incredibly vast area. A few minutes later, he discovered why the space was so large. A colossal golem was waiting there. This spacious area was large enough for the golem to move freely, ready to confront any intruder. The golem attacked with astonishing speed, but Ariaki quickly dodged it. However, he soon realized it wasn't just one golem, but 3 of them. Ariaki remembered how Bibia used to mock him for being just a C-rank adventurer, and how she and Alicia would brag about their ability to fight powerful creatures like golems. They never believed someone as seemingly weak as Ariaki could ever defeat one. Now, Ariaki was determined to prove them wrong. He placed a magical seal on all 3 golems, and with a single incantation, they instantly exploded. With the task complete, Ariaki pressed on and opened a massive door. He believed the person who had summoned him might be inside. As he stepped through, a man greeted him, and revealed that no one had reached this part of the dungeon in over 1,000 years. The man asked for Ariaki's name, but he quickly countered, asking who the man was instead. The man yelled at Ariaki for his rudeness, but introduced himself as the dungeon's high priest anyway. Ariaki said he was in a hurry and demanded the priest bring out the person who had summoned him. The man was amused to hear that someone had summoned Ariaki for help, guessing that the dungeon's protective barrier must have weakened over time. He then informed Ariaki that, despite having come this far, he was in a dungeon from which there was no escape. The man asserted that Ariaki must have used up all his strength fighting the previous monsters. However, he was stunned when Ariaki revealed that he was completely unharmed and had taken almost no damage. This shocked the high priest even more, as he believed no one could face the mighty golems without getting hurt, let alone defeat them in a single blow. Ariaki admitted that the golems were indeed dangerous, but he had destroyed them with just 1 strike, leaving the high priest utterly astonished. Ariaki explained that he had used a skill called magic amplification. Golems are incredibly complex creatures with sophisticated magical nerves and an intricate internal flow of magic. However, they have a single weakness. If external magic infiltrates them, their balance is shattered, causing their magical nerves to go haywire and making them explode from the inside. The high priest still couldn't believe that Ariaki had defeated not just 1, but 3 golems with a single blow. These golems could withstand the combined magical power of an entire nation, which made the high priest incredibly impressed with Ariaki. He suggested that Ariaki should become a vessel so that he could evolve into a god and control everything. However, Ariaki continued to demand that the priest reveal who had summoned him. While searching, Ariaki stumbled upon a giant crystal, and when he looked inside, he saw a girl trapped within it. The high priest explained that the girl locked in the crystal was the daughter of the dragon Geshpent, and she was meant to be used in a ritual to help him evolve into a god. Ariaki berated the high priest for imprisoning such a young girl for so long, saying that no matter what she was, this act was still a crime. He also pointed out that the high priest wasn't some genius, but just a common criminal. When the high priest questioned why capturing a dragon made him a criminal, Ariaki explained that capturing any creature, whether a dragon or a cat, was wrong. He then mocked the high priest, saying that someone like him, who wanted to become a god, would never understand such simple concepts. This mockery enraged the high priest, and he fired a blast of energy from his staff toward Ariaki. Ariaki defended himself with a protective barrier, but he was still caught in the explosion. The high priest, thinking he had won, taunted Ariaki. However, a small stone suddenly flew straight into the high priest's cheek, just inches from his eye, causing immense pain. When the smoke cleared, Ariaki appeared, completely unharmed. He expressed surprise, thinking the high priest would be stronger after absorbing the dragon's energy, but was shocked that his power was so pathetic. This enraged the high priest even more, and he pointed his staff at the crystal containing the dragon girl, threatening to harm her if Ariaki fought back. Not wanting the girl to be hurt, Ariake told the high priest he would cancel his magic. The high priest agreed, and Ariake nullified his magic. The high priest quickly tried to attack, but to his astonishment, the crystal containing the dragon girl suddenly shattered, and a pebble pierced through his arm. He wondered why such a powerful crystal could break so easily. Ariake explained that his nullification skill doesn't just affect his own magic, but the magic of others as well. Ariake decided to break the crystal, even though the high priest warned that it was unbreakable. To everyone's surprise, Ariake easily shattered the crystal, catching the girl and gently placing her on the floor. She quickly regained consciousness and sighed in relief upon seeing him. The dragon girl confessed that she hadn't expected Ariake to save her after she had contacted him telepathically. Ariake used his judgment skill to check on her condition, but she pushed him away, saying she had nothing to repay him with, even though he had saved her. Ariake reassured her that he wasn't expecting any reward. The dragon girl finally noticed the high priest and became furious. She screamed, scolding him for imprisoning her and stealing her power for 1,000 years. She tried to attack him but collapsed to the floor. Ariake told her she was still weak after being imprisoned for so long. The dragon girl began to sulk and complain that she was useless. Ariake asked why she thought that, and she explained that she would tell him since he had saved her. She admitted that for a young dragon of the dragon clan to be called a dragon, they needed to possess 4 powers: longevity, regeneration, destructive power, and the ability to rule the skies. Those were the things that made a true dragon. However, she sighed, saying that her powers had been stolen, and despite being the daughter of the Dragon King, she was considered a failure because her 4 powers were very weak. The dragon girl admitted she couldn't even transform into a giant dragon, but remained the size of a normal human. She couldn't use magic well, and because of this, she was exiled from her country for bringing shame to the royal family. Afterward, she was captured and had her powers stolen. She concluded that even though her powers were weak, they were still stolen, meaning she was no longer a dragon. Overwhelmed with shame, she begged Ariake to end her life, as she couldn't bear to exist in this state any longer. Instead of granting her request, Ariake cheerfully tapped her on the head with his fingers, startling her. He reminded her that he had previously promised not to harm her, but to help her. He gently stroked her head, stirring strong emotions within her. Through tear-filled eyes, she confided in him that her powers were beyond recovery, and even if they did return, she would still be weak. However, Ariake unexpectedly shared an idea, expressing his desire to conduct an experiment, explaining that he not only wanted to restore the girl's powers, but also break the curse that made her weak. With a sudden stomp of his foot, a magic rune appeared beneath the girl's feet. She was stunned to discover she had been cursed. Ariake explained that thanks to his special skills like abnormal status perception and hidden nullification, he had discovered a rare curse on her. He said he could break the curse and restore her powers by using the rune beneath her feet. He activated his remove curse skill, combined it with restoration, and then used speed up time to accelerate the process. Ariake asked her to try and endure what was about to happen. In an instant, she felt an intense pain, as if a powerful force was crushing her. Suddenly, a ghostly entity escaped from her mouth and hovered in the air. She collapsed to the floor, and Ariake rushed to her side, anxiously asking if she was still alive. She came to, gasping for air. They both looked at the floating, ghostly entity. The girl asked if it had really been inside her. Ariake explained that it was hidden so well that a normal judgment couldn't have detected it. It was an anti-dragon curse which robs dragons of their purpose and weakens their powers model. Suddenly, the curse went out of control and entered the high priest. Ariake said that the curse seemed to have rebounded on its caster, since they had prevented the cursed person from being cursed a second time. The curse was originally created to nullify a dragon's power, but when it entered a human, it caused them to disintegrate instantly, and the high priest died on the spot. Suddenly, the dragon girl felt power surging through her body. Ariake explained that now that the thing suppressing her power was gone, her regenerative abilities had kicked in at full speed. Excited, she tested her power by blowing the roof off the dungeon, creating an escape route for them. She was overjoyed to finally understand her true potential. Unexpectedly, she called Ariake Master, surprising him. She thanked him for saving her, and then, a little flustered, asked Ariake about her appearance and if he liked it. Ariake and Colette, the dragon girl, made their way to the town of Alti. Colette still couldn't understand why the hero's party had kicked Ariake out, even though he had supported them so much. Ariaki told Colette not to be angry, saying he was happy to know they could carry on without his support. He added that, thinking back on it, the moment they parted ways had become a sweet memory for him, which only confused Colette more. He explained that if they could avoid a terrible future just by making some silly demands, then he was fine with that. Colette, feeling anxious, asked if he had a girlfriend in the hero's party. Ariaki replied that he had 3 of them, which made Colette boil with rage. And she swore she wouldn't lose to them. Meanwhile, a few hours earlier, Bibia and the other heroes were drinking and laughing about how pathetic Ariaki looked when he left the party. Everyone agreed, with Purara even commenting that he was a real nuisance. They asked Alicia if she thought so too, and she just agreed nonchalantly, adding that an adventuring party is meaningless without a hero. B agreed, declaring that as long as they had the hero, nothing would be a problem. Babia then told the group that since they'd just lost a member, they would go back to raid the cursed cave they had conquered before. Purara added that it might be easier now that Ariaki was gone, and Babia laughed loudly in agreement. He looked at Alicia, who was still staring out the window, and asked if she was listening. Without taking her eyes off the window, she quietly said that they were missing something. Meanwhile, Ariaki and Colette arrived at the town of Medicine, and Ariaki suggested they rest there since Alti was still a long way off. However, Colette was fascinated by the buildings, saying they still looked new despite 1,000 years having passed. While the town seemed prosperous, Ariaki couldn't help but feel that something was wrong. Before he could voice his concerns, Colette was already running around town like a child. She smelled something delicious and told Ariaki they should go check it out, calling him hubby, which confused many of the passers-by. Ariaki told Colette he would only go with her if she didn't act so conspicuously. A moment later, they found a tavern and enjoyed some amazing food, while Colette carried a whole roasted pig. Ariaki reminded her to be careful, but she simply bit the pig's head off without any trouble. The owner approached them, happy to see them enjoying the food. However, despite the delicious food, the tavern was empty. He even said he wasn't sure how much longer he could stay in business. Then, he advised them to leave if they didn't want to get into trouble. Ariaki then explained to Colette that the demon forest was actually a nest of monsters created by the demon lord. It was more dangerous than a dungeon, as monsters could jump out at any moment. Ariaki explained to Colette that the threat from the demon forest was divided into 5 stages, and they were currently in the first stage, so it was still manageable. He decided to go to the Adventurers Guild to get more information on the demon forest before taking action. Later, upon entering the guild, the other adventurers couldn't help but stare at the pair. They approached the reception desk, where Ariaki gave his name and asked for information about the demon forest. Immediately, the adventurers recognized his name and began to whisper amongst themselves about him being there. The receptionist then told him to wait there, as there was an ordinance from the king himself. A moment later, a burly man emerged from a room behind the counter and introduced himself as Osim, the guildmaster. He asked Ariaki if he was, in fact, Mihama Ariake. Ariaki confirms that it is indeed him, though he'd have a hard time proving it. Osim tells Ariake there's no need for proof, as his description on a wanted poster looks just like him. He just never expected him to walk so confidently into an adventurer's guild. He then informs Ariake that the king has issued a decree for him. His adventurer's license has been revoked. The other adventurers are shocked to hear this news, as they know that revoking an adventurer's license is reserved only for those who have committed the most heinous crimes. Ariake is also shocked by this turn of events, believing that at worst he would only be demoted to E rank. And now he can't even buy materials, let alone take on requests. Colette finds it strange for Ariake to say that, but keeps a smile on her face. He explains that he only joined because of the system, and with the demon forest appearing recently, they would need all the manpower they could get. However, Osim and the other adventurers just scoff, declaring that the kingdom's night squad has already been sent to deal with the problem, so all they need to do is clean up after the job is done, with no need for someone like him. Colette asks if she can turn them to ash, but Ariake tells her not to, as it would only cause trouble. Meanwhile, Ariake finds it strange that the night squad was sent instead of the heroes' party, since they weren't far, and wonders if something happened to them. As Osim and the other adventurers continue to laugh at him, he tells Colette that it's time to go. But before he can, the door suddenly bursts open and an injured knight stumbles inside. The knight informs the adventurers that the subjugation has failed. He adds that an army of monsters is heading for the town, pleading with the adventurers to prepare for its defense, and that all deserters will be executed. The knight then collapses to the floor, falling silent. As the guild panics, Ariake examines the knight and confirms that he'll live, though he is comatose. Osum tries to calm everyone down and raise their morale, but the adventurers still seem shaken, wondering how they could possibly do what the Night Squad couldn't. Ariake then approaches Osim, saying there's still someone willing to take on the role. Before Osim can say a word, Ariake drops a large bag of money in front of him, asking if Osim would let him handle things. Osim asks Ariake what someone like him could possibly do to stop the monster army. Ariake then tells him not to say things like that, and asks what the fee for the cleanup operation would be. Osim says they'd be paid 1 gold coin each, which is far too cheap, considering they're risking their lives for it. Ariake agrees, saying that if the workers aren't paid a reasonable wage, it's understandable that they wouldn't want to do the job. He then does a head count, confirming there should be enough of them. Meanwhile, the adventurers wonder what he's doing standing on the reception desk. He empties the bag of money out in front of everyone to see. Gold coins begin to pour out, piling up on the table. Ariake promises to reward anyone who follows him, participates, and stays until the very end of the upcoming battle, with a handsome payment of 100 gold coins. At first, the adventurers are skeptical, thinking it might just be an empty promise. But Ariake declares that it is a contract under the regulations of the Great Kingdom. They promise this is so sacred, it's even considered a binding curse. With that, the adventurers begin to consider the offer, fully aware of what 100 gold coins are worth. Ariake then reminds them that as adventurers, they are the only barrier between the monsters and the peaceful town. It is their duty to risk their lives to fight and preserve that peace. Upon hearing this, the adventurers begin to cheer, their morale now soaring. Osim then orders them to start preparing for the road ahead. Later, during the preparations, Osim thanks Ariake, admitting that no one would have stepped up to the front lines if it weren't for him. Osim is certain that without Ariake, no one would have listened to a man like him. But now he feels almost godlike and wonders if this is really the useless Ariake that people have been talking about. With a devilish expression, Colette taunts Osim, calling him a stupid bald man, adding that he was just swayed by money and should know his place. Ariake then corrects her, saying it's normal to be moved by money, because money allows people to live their lives. Those in positions of power have a responsibility to pay proper compensation, so sending people to their deaths for just 1 gold coin is insane. Osim then asks him how he acquired so much money, and Ariake simply replies that it was his savings, much to Osim's utter astonishment. Osim is still suspicious of Ariake's motives, wondering why a mere traveler would go to such lengths for them. Then, he said there was a famous restaurant with delicious pasta, and it would be a shame if he couldn't enjoy it anymore, adding a smile. Osim then said that if they returned safely, he would treat Ariake to pasta with his reward money, forgetting that it was Ariake's money in the end. Finally, when the preparations were complete, Osim reminded the adventurers that they were the town's last line of defense and laid out the strategy for the battle. In the end, he said that although the situation seemed hopeless, they had no choice but to win. Watching from a distance, Colette expressed her concern for the adventurers, saying they were completely outnumbered, with at least 1,000 monsters based on the tremors the horde was making, while there were only about 100 adventurers. She asked Ariake if he could just destroy the monsters for them. Ariake replied that if he gave them the idea of a savior who does everything, it wouldn't do them any good. He stressed that the adventurers needed to have the confidence to fight on their own. Colette then saw a pillar of fire rise high into the air and informed Ariake that the battle had begun. He told her they would join the adventurers, saying that while the adventurers must help each other to win, it still wasn't wrong for him to support them. Then, as the battle raged on, the adventurers struggled to deal with the monsters. Constant explosions echoed around them as they fought in one area. The Nagul brothers fought bravely, but were overwhelmed by the sheer number of monsters. They refused to surrender, as doing so would spell doom for their hometown. Back with Osim, one of the adventurers reported that 1/3 of their left flank had been wiped out, and the Nagul brothers were seriously injured. Another reported that the right flank needed reinforcements because a deep dragon had appeared there. Finally, another adventurer called out the guild leader's name, as an ogre king was approaching them, which the adventurers recognized as an S-rank monster. Osim then ordered a retreat. But before they could do so, the ogre king roared, rendering them unable to fight. The monsters saw this as an opportunity to kill as many adventurers as possible. As one of the monsters lunged to kill an adventurer, Ariake dashed in and beheaded the monster, saving her. He explained to the adventurer that it was the Ogre King's dread skill. As the adventurer thanked him, Colette wedged herself between them, cutting Osim off. He asked Ariake why he was so close to the front lines, saying that a C rank like him would die instantly. Ariake replied that since he was the one who made the request, he had a duty to win. Ariake then used his skill and with a word, strengthened their mental resistance. With that, the adventurers realized that not only could they move, but their bodies also felt lighter than usual. He ordered Colette to start moving, and she immediately leaped into the air, unleashing a massive fireball at the monsters, incinerating them. Osim, speechless with shock, asked Ariake who she really was. Ignoring him, Ariake remarked on the incredible power she had. Then, Ariake explained that their army's problem was one of numbers, as even with sufficient defenses, they couldn't protect themselves against an army that outnumbered them tenfold. But for that reason, he would use his skills to boost their stats tenfold. And not only that, he would also reduce the enemy's stats to 1/10. At first, Osim was doubtful, saying such a feat was impossible. But Ariake reassured him, telling him they should just focus on winning. He began to cast spells continuously, slowly strengthening the adventurers and weakening the monsters. Before long, as the monsters charged, the heroes easily cut them down, almost as if it were a joke. Osim was shocked and amazed to see Ariake cast 20 spells, even though the supposed maximum was only 3. Ariake then explained that he often did that much back in the hero's party, perhaps even more. The adventurers now realized that in the end, the hero party's victories were all thanks to Ariake. Colette then spoke up, asserting that despite all he had done, the hero's party still kicked him out. Ariake immediately told her not to say that, explaining that they had simply decided they could carry on without his skills, and he respected their decision like a parent. Some of the other adventurers warned that more monsters were coming. This time, however, they began to move with more confidence thanks to Ariake's protection. They noticed that the Ogre King wasn't moving much, perhaps because it was being cautious, or because it didn't think it needed to if it could let the other monsters do the work. However, Ariake couldn't help but feel that something was wrong, confused as to why a monster like the Ogre King would appear in the early stages of the Demon Forest. He then told Colette that she could go fight it, as the adventurers wouldn't be able to defeat the Ogre King. The Ogre King tried to crush some of the adventurers under its hand, but Colette stopped it in time. It then tried to roar again, but Colette punched it in the face, knocking it back. After casting a few more spells, Ariake kicked the ogre, sweeping its legs out from under it. As Colette was distracted watching Ariake, the Ogre King grabbed her and slammed her into the ground. Osim thought he was talking about the Ogre King slamming Colette down, but when Colette stood up, Ariake clarified that he wasn't talking about that. As she got up, she told Ariake that she was going to show the Ogre King a little of her power. Ariake was intrigued and agreed to see what she could do. While Osim was cutting down a goblin, he realized it was the last of the smaller ones. One of the adventurers reported that both flanks had finished clearing out the remaining monsters. Osim then told an adventurer to inform the others that they would reinforce the central team in the Demon Forest. He then turned to Ariake, saying that they were done with the other monsters, but stopped short when he saw a giant vortex in the sky created by the ogre's roar. The adventurers fell to the ground, unable to withstand the pressure. Meanwhile, Colette, wiping blood from her face, told Ariake that they should end this. However, Ariake was worried about whether she could use her newly recovered power and the strain it might put on her. So he cast some buffing spells on her just to be safe. Colette was a little offended by this, believing he was underestimating her. Ariake apologized, clearly still holding on to his overprotective habits from his days in the hero's party. Colette then told Ariake not to worry because if she thought of it as his love for her, then she would feel much stronger. As she powered up, something began to resonate with Ariake. He told Colette that if she was truly a god dragon, then she should use her dragon knight powers as she pleased. He then used the skill Decisive Battle. Colette revealed her true form, the great dragon appearing on the battlefield. To the surprise of all the adventurers, the skill, Decisive Battle, allows a person to regain their innate power for a short time, so using it on Colette allowed her to use her innate power without suffering the strain that came with it. In her new form, Colette declared to the Ogre King that, by her name, and by the name of the Dragon Knight Ariake, she would pass judgment upon him. She then summoned flames and used the skill Final Wrath, a powerful beam of light that rained down on the ogre, and engulfed him, shaking the battlefield. When the smoke cleared, the adventurers were stunned to see that the Ogre King had been completely vaporized. Immediately, Colette reverted to her normal form and collapsed. Ariaki caught her just in time, telling her she did a great job. She smiled and told Ariaki that using her full power felt amazing. This marked the defeat of the Ogre King. Suddenly, a light appeared in the sky, and Osim recognized it as a signal from the central team, marking the end of their cleanup mission. The adventurers began to cheer, calling the battle a miracle. Ariaki then told them it wasn't right to simply describe the battle as a miracle or a coincidence. In the end, they were the ones who bravely stood up and fought against all the monsters to protect the town. Ultimately, it was their victory, achieved by putting their own lives on the line. With that, all the adventurers returned to town in high spirits. A few days later, Ariaki prepared to leave Medicine Town, much to the disappointment of the townspeople and adventurers. They continued to promise to repay his kindness, but Ariake told them to give him some time. Osim intervened, saying they were being disrespectful. He then knelt before Ariake, apologizing for his own disrespect and offering to retract the decision to revoke his license, stating that he had sent a letter of protest on behalf of the town to the kingdom. A little exasperated, Ariake told him there was no need for that, and that he should stop being so formal. He smiled. Osim told him he was welcome to visit any time he wished. As they parted ways, Osim reminded him to stay safe. Later on the road, Colette was still buzzing with excitement about being able to use her sacred dragon form. She was also happy that the townspeople had been kind enough to give them a horse and carriage. Ariaki then told her they would be stopping in Ordentown, and since they had a letter of introduction, it would be convenient for them to stop there. To get there, they would have to pass through the fertile forests which were inhabited by fairies. They both agreed that fairies could sometimes be difficult to deal with. Colette offered to burn them to a crisp if they dared to challenge Ariake, but Ariaki told her to stop thinking about burning everything right away. However, Ariaki was still wondering why they had sent Nightcore to the Devil's Forest instead of the hero party, as he still couldn't find any information on the matter. Seeing his worried face, Colette stuffed a bun into Ariake's mouth, telling him to think about it later and that they should just move at their own pace. Ariaki decided to do just that, telling himself he was just overthinking things. Meanwhile, in a cave, Bibia was heavily injured and could barely stand without using his sword for support. He was frustrated, wondering why he had to go through all this, even though he was the hero. Bibia screamed, questioning what that monster was doing here of all places. Elga tried to tell Bibia something about Purara and Alicia, but Bibia snapped about how unimportant their absence was. They should be prioritizing running as far away as possible from the bloodthirsty monsters chasing them. Bibia was momentarily distracted, and a monster apparently took aim at him, lunging to attack. Luckily, Elga used his shield to protect Bibia, blocking the monster's attack. However, the monster was so strong that Elga struggled to hold his ground. The beast pushed hard against the barrier Elga created, which Bibia noticed and began to complain about how Elga should be protecting him better. Elga gritted his teeth and said he was doing his best, as always. But Bibia just contemplated how dire the situation was. He was out of MP and recovery potions. This dungeon was supposed to be a warm-up, not a difficult battle for an S-rank hero. A few hours earlier, he had been standing outside the cursed cave, thinking that reaching the 50th floor would be a piece of cake for someone like him. The whole party agreed, as they had been to this cave many times before, led by their reliable S-rank hero. They had nothing to worry or be afraid of. The saint had bothered to ask how prepared they were before entering. She had expressed that they were under-equipped and needed to stock up on more items. The saint had been insistent that with Ariake absent, it was only logical for them to do what he would have done. Bring enough items so no one would be put in a difficult situation. But Bibia just waved her off, saying she was such a worrywart. Purara mocked her for being selfish with her healing powers, asking if they had her healing. What was the point of items? However, Bibia ended the conversation by insisting they would enter the cave. And now that Ariake wasn't around, Purara was the one needed to light the way. She grumbled about the inconvenience of such menial tasks now that Ariake wasn't around. Alicia called Ariake a burden, saying they would be better off without him. His absence gave Purara a chance to prove herself as a great mage, which immediately stopped Purara from grumbling. Bibia felt that Purara and Delia were easy to manipulate because they were in love with him. A few words of praise and they would easily follow. Alicia was different, but it was never impossible. They would all kneel before him because he was the hero, with grand ambitions to defeat the Demon King and claim the rescued kingdom's princess as his prize. That kingdom he would rule as he saw fit. Bibia told the group they would grab some drinks after returning from the cave. At dusk, Alicia decided to keep quiet. She had tried her best, but they still wouldn't listen. They entered the cave and heard a noise. When they looked up, they realized it was the sound of a bat. "It's just a normal bat," Bibia said, before asking, or rather ordering, Purara to increase the light. They could barely see the approaching enemy with the dim light she was providing. Purara pleaded with Bibia not to be angry as she was doing her best. But Bibia was still furious, asserting that even Ariake did a better job of lighting the way for them. Purara stammered in agreement, mentioning that it was his job, so of course he was good at it. Alicia said that Ariake once told her a dungeon is like the inside of a living creature. Unlike a normal building, a dungeon has its own magic, and any magic used by outside entities is constantly restricted. A monster suddenly appeared, and Delia quickly landed a successful attack. She then expressed that she wanted them to stop talking about Ariake and keep moving. The monster Delia had just attacked got back up, much to their disbelief as it should have died from the first hit. Delia attacked again, and this time Elga confirmed the monster was dead. Delia wondered why the monster wasn't defeated normally, and Bibia taunted Putada that it was all her fault, since her light was too dim and weak. They decided to press on, and Alicia tried again to tell them that they really shouldn't have done that in the first place. If their vision was obscured, they shouldn't advance. A wiser move would have been to retreat and form a proper plan before returning. Bibia called Alicia a worrywart too cautious, and insisted that retreating meant they'd have to turn their backs on the enemy, which was even more dangerous. As the commander, he declared that they would keep going, while inwardly he was fuming. Alicia continued to challenge and object to Bibia's command. This dungeon is for C-rank adventurers, so being asked to retreat is unacceptable. What would a society think? At one point, they realized they were walking in circles, meaning they were lost. This brought out Bibia's sharp tongue again, saying it shouldn't have been this difficult if they'd had a map. Saint Alicia pointed out that Ariake had been working with an incomplete map, but upon closer inspection, they realized he'd done them the favor of leaving marks on the cave walls, helping them find their way better than any map could. A loud sound echoed, which Purara thought might belong to a boss monster, even though they were in a low-level dungeon. A skeleton knight appeared, and the party sighed in relief as they landed a slash on it. The skeleton knight was beheaded but survived. A skeleton knight is a C-rank creature that should have been defeated with a single blow. Something even stranger happened when Bibia felt himself being counterattacked. His own sword was turned against him, causing him to stab himself in the stomach. Bibia cried out in pain, which was so intense he couldn't move. The skeleton knight raised its blood-stained scythe to finish him off, but Elga immediately jumped in to protect the hero. He aimed to strike back with his shield, but the knight easily dodged, laughing mockingly. Elga couldn't help but comment on his own pathetic speed. Bibia felt relieved to be safe, but hoped Elga could deal with the enemy quickly. Delia watched in shock, wondering if skeleton knights had always been this tough. Skeletal creatures are level 20 monsters, which anyone should be able to defeat. The party had taken down many such creatures in the past, so it was baffling why it was so difficult now. Elga continued to struggle with the monster, prompting Bibia to scream at him for his incompetence. Fortunately, Elga stood up for himself, telling Bibia to shut up, since Bibia himself hadn't had any better luck with the monster. Delia stepped in with her unblockable killer punch. But the monster remained unharmed, much to their astonishment. The monster then unleashed its own magic, knocking Delia back, and blood trickled from her mouth. She was now in critical condition from a low-level magic attack that didn't even require an incantation. Purara knew it was strange that their powers were so weak. Bibia agrees and orders Purara to use support magic on the party. Purara admits she's been doing so from the start, as was usual when Ariake was around. Bibia then realizes that they are, in fact, at their best, but it's still not enough, which causes Bibia to panic. Alicia insists that they're struggling because Ariake isn't present. Bibia again asserts that Ariake isn't important enough to be constantly mentioned. Alicia then announces that holy water is a weapon they can use against the skeleton knight. It will stop its movements, and she's only mentioning this now because Bibia couldn't make a decision on his own. Bibia needs to know, as Alicia mentioned, that Ariake's support skills were what kept their party stable. His skills were the reason. They all had the potential to become A-rank adventurers. Bibia is still in denial, saying he reached his current level through training. Alicia, having now recovered her healing abilities, started talking about regrouping. They would retreat for a while because their equipment wasn't good enough. That word again? Retreat. Bibia wanted to object, but Alicia promised them that only death awaited if they continued on. In the end, they decided to leave the dungeon. As they went, Alicia admitted that she could use more of her healing power on them, but it would drain her MP. Using her MP so recklessly wasn't a wise thing to do. Bibia suggested using items, but everyone was running low. He demanded that Purara hand over all of her support items, but she refused, saying she would need them in the future. Bibia, however, didn't see why she would need them, since she was doing almost nothing in their current situation. He asked Alicia to check Purara's remaining magical energy level, and Alicia revealed that it had dropped significantly. The proof was that their field of light was gradually shrinking. Back when Ariake was still around, he had used a skill called magic storage on Purara. That was why she always boasted about being able to hold over 10,000 items. Purara fell into a state of denial, accusing Alicia of talking nonsense just because she'd been bullied a little. She couldn't accept that the title of Saintess Tess had suddenly made Alicia feel so powerful. The party continued to argue and complain, and then they woke something that was sleeping. They had awakened a Fenrir, a monster that was only supposed to exist on the 99th floor. The Fenrir had just left its den to find something to eat, and upon seeing their group, it decided they would be its lunch. Bibia recognized it as the Hell's Gatekeeper with its palpable killing intent, putting everyone in extreme danger. Fenrir, according to rumor, lived on the 99th floor, not the 15th. This was a monster that even S-rank adventurers struggled to face. Purara suggested they all run, but Bibia countered that such a reckless move could lead to the entire party's annihilation. Even Bibia realized this. They might have handled the monster with ease in the past, but not now. As much as everyone wanted to run, the best option right now was to use someone as a decoy. He began to analyze who would be suitable, ruling out Alicia since she was an S-rank member with essential healing abilities. Elga and Delia were also ruled out. That left Purara. Bibia punched her in the stomach and took the extra items he suspected she was holding onto. Elga screamed at him to stop this foolishness, crying that this was the worst possible time to be divided. Bibia retorted that they would need those items to escape, and there was no other way. The cruel plan was to leave Purara behind while the others escaped. She was the weakest link with low magic, making her a burden to the party. "It's not like we're abandoning her," he said. "We're just leaving her temporarily so we can escape and get help for her." Delia agreed with the plan, leaving the others stunned in disbelief. In truth, Bibia had no intention of calling for aid. Purara was to be the decoy and she was going to die. Alicia refused to leave, offering to stay and fight the Fenrir. She created a magical barrier, blocking the other three members, leaving only herself and Purara to face the danger. Bibia was pleased with the barrier as it bought the group enough time to escape. He quickly announced they were leaving immediately and promised to return with reinforcements. Purara watched them go, vowing she would never forgive them. She cursed them, but the Fenrir offered to take care of the group for her, saying her curses were unnecessary. Alicia began to converse with the Fenrir, which frustrated Purara. She was terrified they were going to die. This was no time for a chat with a monster. Alicia told Purara to calm down, saying she had no intention of letting them die. The Fenrir asked Alicia what she wanted, as her determination was clear. It wondered if she wanted revenge on her comrades, or if she wanted the power to save the world. Alicia replied that she wanted neither. Instead, all she wanted was to bring Ariake back and have a romance with him. This enraged Purara even more. She claimed Ariake was useless and no hero. Alicia retorted that Ariake was special, contrary to the appraiser's judgment. Alicia then asked the Fenrir for permission to tell a story, and it agreed. She began by explaining that she had studied every book across the continent, until she came to a conclusion. Ariake had a unique skill called the God by your side. Purara's curiosity began to grow. Alicia continued, saying it was a fairy tale that had existed for over 10,000 years. It was a story they had all heard since they were children, from their own grandmothers. The tale told that when the hero who would save the world appeared, that hero would be served by a god who provided all manner of assistance. Purara asked if this meant Ariake was a god, but Alicia explained that it was just a metaphor, not to be taken literally. Ariake was more like someone chosen by the gods. In the fairy tale, the deity was described as a benevolent being, always offering advice to the hero and helping him in every way possible to save the world. Defeating the Demon King would have been impossible without this deity's help. From buffing stats, using skills, and managing items to guiding the party through dungeons, the hero's party was able to maintain their peak condition thanks to Ariake. He was the perfect support for the hero's party, just as the fairy tale described. Alicia tried to persuade Purara, reasoning that she must have realized it long ago. Ariake had been their solid foundation, and now they were struggling against low-level creatures like skeleton knights. Fenrir declared that the time for discussion was over, and Alicia gave Purara the support and recovery items she had brought. She told Purara to use them and provide support from the rear. If they didn't act quickly despite Purara's constant complaints, they would all die. Fenrir said that killing the likes of them would be no trouble at all, and Alicia reasoned that if they were truly not worth fighting, then Fenrir could just spare them. Fenrir expressed that it had lived in the dungeon for so long and was so bored that it wanted to entertain itself with a battle against them. Purara started to flee with the items Alicia had given her, as it seemed everyone was just looking out for themselves. Alicia's barrier was dispelled, and she admitted that it was originally created to prevent any outside elements from interfering. Fenrir quickly charged into battle, but after a few exchanges, it realized Alicia was not as easy a target as it had thought. Alicia was well prepared. She struck Fenrir a heavy blow with her staff, causing it to temporarily lose its balance. Fenrir acknowledged her strength and asked if Alicia was truly human, to be able to knock back such a giant monster. Alicia assured it that was just one of her weaker attacks because she no longer had Ariake's support to make her stronger. This angered Fenrir, since she could stand up to it even at her weakest. Fenrir went on to admit that Alicia's power was not something a normal human possessed, and its curiosity made it want to know the true source of that great strength. Alicia expressed that she had trained a lot, but Fenrir didn't easily believe that. It asserted that everything has its limits, and even excessive training could only grant so much power. It tried to find the real answer, but Alicia held her ground, stating that her strength was the result of training. Or perhaps it wasn't a cover, because according to her, her current power was the fruit of many years of harsh training, the kind that makes you ache and cough up blood. Fenrir then asked why she would go to such extremes to gain the power she now had. Alicia admitted that Ariake had always been her motivation. He once told her she had to become stronger. If she became strong, she could easily impress Ariake. All she ever wanted was to be strong enough to become his support, because maybe then they could get married. Fenrir remarked that she was the great Saintess Tess, but it wanted to know if Ariake was stronger than her. Alicia affirmed that he was stronger, and that the title of Saintess Tess was just a nuisance to her. She just wished Ariake could see her for who she really was. Fenrir decided that Ariake was the most interesting person it had heard of since being sealed in the cave. Now it had a new goal, to meet Ariake, the man stronger than even Saintess Tess, and fight him to the death. It sounded like a suicide mission to Alicia, and she doubted that Ariake would agree to fight Fenrir under such conditions. Alicia came up with a better proposal. She would fight Fenrir, and if she won, it would have to grant her one wish. Fenrir agreed, vowing that its promise to her would not be broken. The two began their fight, and Alicia was the one who emerged victorious. Fenrir then asked what her wish was. It suggested that she might want eternal life and everlasting youth from a miracle drug in exchange for its life, or perhaps a legendary sword it had once swallowed. Alicia's request took Fenrir completely by surprise. She wanted it to become her familiar. Alicia reasoned that if she had Fenrir as her familiar, she would look powerful to anyone she met. Moreover, she believed this would give Fenrir a new purpose after thousands of years of being sealed in a cave, which was better than just waiting to die. Fenrir refused, but Alicia reminded it of its vow. Fenrir explained that the curse upon it did not allow it to leave the cave. Fenrir wasn't against becoming Alicia's familiar, but it reminded her to consider the curse, which would make it useless to her. It apologized and confessed that it had actually liked the idea of them adventuring together. Alicia came up with a plan for Fenrir to die temporarily so she could put it in her item box. If it couldn't leave the cave alive, then it would leave while temporarily dead. Alicia reassured Fenrir that she would be able to resurrect it within 2 to 3 hours of its death. Fenrir was skeptical, saying that no living mage could use resurrection magic. So it apologized if it doubted her abilities. Alicia recalled that this was one of the rare times Ariake had ever praised her, so she was always eager to use his ideas along with her magic to achieve something extraordinary. Fenrir then had to decide whether it would live or die. Fenrir admitted that Alicia had been an interesting companion. If she could truly resurrect it, then it looked forward to meeting Ariake, the man she had mentioned so many times. Alicia promised that she would bring it back. And Fenrir swore loyalty and service to both Alicia and Ariake after its revival. Leaving the cave, Alicia planned to find a large, open field with no witnesses to perform Fenrir's revival. Fenrir revealed that she was female and could take on a human form, which would make things easier. However, Alicia misunderstood, worrying that Fenrir could become a rival for Ariake's affection if she turned out to be beautiful. She then had to confront feelings of jealousy, which, combined with the boost in her stats, left her even more confused. Alicia reunited with the group and announced that she was leaving the party. Fortunately, there was also news that Parara had safely escaped the cave. Elga expressed that Alicia was still very much needed, especially now that the kingdom's council had decided to confiscate Babia's holy sword, because he had acted cowardly and abandoned his comrades. To get the sword back, the group needed to complete a D-rank quest. They revealed they were looking for a new porter, and that there was still a spot open for Alicia if she felt ready to return. Alicia was proud as she was now free to reunite with Ariake. Meanwhile, Ariake was busy saving the medicine town from monsters, after which he headed to the fertile forest where the elves lived. News of the trouble with Babia's sword had not yet reached him. Ariake and Colette arrived at the elven forest, but were met with a surprisingly hostile reception. They were surrounded by elven archers and soldiers who had orders to arrest Ariake, whom they called the Walking Disaster. The army commander informed Ariake that they would complete their mission, whether they had to use force or not. Colette angrily intervened, using her fire magic to incinerate the bows and arrows aimed at them. She even praised their courage for trying to capture her husband, as she often called Ariake. It seems Alicia was about to face an unexpected rival. Colette was ready to do more, but Ariake stopped her since he didn't understand what was going on. The soldiers had no intention of negotiating and instead tried to attack Ariake. He enhanced his physical strength to intimidate them a little, but they accused him of wanting to destroy their forest. More elves appeared, joining forces to create the Wind King barrier, a barrier of wind that could shred anyone who touched it. Colette had a few tricks to deal with the barrier, but Ariake didn't want to destroy the forest or harm the elves. He touched the barrier and fell to the ground. The army commander approached to see if he was dead. It turned out Ariake had used a skill to control his power surge, causing him to only bleed a little. He told the commander that his action was to prove he meant no harm. Ariake then asked to negotiate, but the commander still didn't trust him. After all, they had been ordered to capture him by the great elf king Hayes. Just then, Princess Sarah, the great king's sister, ran in and shouted for the soldiers to cease their hostilities. She explained that she knew Ariake and Colette, as they had saved her in the medicine town not long ago. Princess Sarah had been disguised as an elven scout when Ariake saved her from a poisonous orchid. She knelt before Ariake, apologizing and begging for his forgiveness, much to the surprise of all the elves present. As a way to atone, she invited them to Alpha Village. Although the army commander disagreed, he still respected the princess's order. She also ordered that Hayes be immediately notified of the Walking Disaster's presence. On the way to the village, they discovered that the logs floating in the river were mostly rotten wood flowing from upstream. Princess Sarah treated them to a delicious meal at her home in the village. Sarah was very kind to them, which made Colette suspect she had other intentions with her husband. After the meal, Ariake asked to understand the situation in the forest and why he was being called a walking disaster. Sarah explained that the forest had been a fertile land until about a year ago. Although the areas around Alpha Village were not yet affected, there was a gloomy place in the forest where dark clouds gathered and the decay was at its worst. It seemed to be related to elemental magic, and it was likely that monsters would emerge from there. Along with the decay of the trees, public order in the village was also getting worse. As for why Ariake was called the Walking Disaster, that was the conclusion the great King Hayes had reached after carefully studying the records. The treaty allows heroes and their comrades to move freely within the forest. But since Ariake was exiled and seen as an enemy of the hero, it's no surprise the elves also considered him an enemy. Although the timing of the two events didn't line up, Hayes chose to blame Ariake because he desperately needed an answer for the village's problems. Princess Sarah pleaded with Ariake to save their village, just as he had saved the medicine town. Just then, King Hayes appeared, interrupting their conversation and accusing Ariake of trying to destroy their village. He put Sarah in handcuffs and ignored her pleas. Sarah was to be briefly imprisoned until she calmed down. Ariake intervened, shattering the handcuffs with a single punch and demanding to speak with Hayes. Ariake's latest action left everyone, especially Hayes, utterly stunned. Hayes was shocked by the audacity of this walking disaster. Ariake told Hayes that he should release Princess Sarah and focus on him instead. Great King Hayes was furious and questioned Ariake's recklessness. Tensions escalated on both sides, and Colette also emitted a fighting aura, ready to strike the Great King. Partly for Ariake's sake, and partly because Hayes' actions had ruined their meal. Ariake told Colette to stand down while Hayes was bewildered by Colette's presence. After a moment of fear, Hayes regained his composure and decided to capture Ariake to save the forest. He ordered his guards to seize them. Ariake and Colette didn't know how to escape as the doors were blocked. But luckily, Princess Sarah called to them from behind and showed them an escape route. They leaped from a great height and kept running, until they had put a safe distance between them and the guards. It seems Sarah's days of sneaking off for adventures had finally paid off. Ariake urged everyone to keep moving, but they were stopped by Hayes' Wind King's seal barrier. The Great King had blocked them from behind and attacked. Hayes revealed that he had originally intended to capture them alive, but their latest actions, including escaping with the princess, had made him change his mind. He explained that his latest barrier was so powerful it was more of an attack than a shield, and there was no way they could survive it. After the technique ended and the dust settled, Princess Sarah mourned her fallen friends, while Great King Hayes was satisfied that the forest could finally recover. Ariake spoke up from behind, sarcastically telling Hayes not to get ahead of himself. As it turned out, he had used his cloning skill to create a copy as a diversion. While that clone was killed, Ariake had used his stealth skill to sneak behind the elves. At this point, Ariake understood that convincing Hayes of his innocence would be difficult, so he decided to surrender. He allowed Hayes to capture him and Colette, requesting to be held in the magic prison, which prevents any magic from escaping. Ariake reasoned that if the forest continued to wither after they were imprisoned, it would prove he wasn't the culprit behind the disaster. Hayes agreed to this proposal without hesitation as he firmly believed in Ariake's guilt. Ariake and Colette were taken to the elven prison, which looked more comfortable than many homes. There, they discovered that Princess Sarah was also imprisoned with them. Sarah explained she was being held for helping Ariake and Colette escape, but she held no grudge against them. She even said she'd be happy to be imprisoned with Ariake forever, which immediately put Colette on guard. Colette was ready to find a way out of the prison, but Ariake revealed that the barrier could also nullify physical attacks, although Colette's might not be purely physical. However, he had a way to escape if he wanted to. The barrier reflects magical energy, so he could use a reversal spell to make the barrier absorb too much energy and collapse. Despite this perfect plan, Ariake had no intention of escaping until his innocence was proven. He advised Colette to be patient, as everything would become clear in time. It had been 1 week since the walking disaster was imprisoned, but the situation hadn't improved. A large area of the forest had recently been consumed by an evil force, and Great King Hayes was investigating. Hayes ordered the affected area to be purified to stop the decay from spreading and prevent the buildup of malice. He also ordered the magic barrier to be strengthened, just in case the problem originated from there. Deep down, however, Hayes was beginning to doubt his decision and wonder if Ariake was really the cause of the disaster. In his 10 years of rule, he had never experienced a calamity like this. The logging project had helped the people become wealthier, and as elves, they grew stronger thanks to nature. Hayes recalled someone suggesting that he himself was being rejected by the forest, and that was the cause of the disaster. He wondered if that could be true. Hayes also remembered how he had deduced that Ariake was the source of the disaster after hearing the news that he'd been kicked out of the hero's party during his last visit. After careful consideration, Hayes finally concluded that Ariake was not the source of the calamity. Just then, the ground began to shake, and it seemed like something huge was coming. Meanwhile, at the prison, Colette complained about how much time had passed since they were imprisoned. Sarah, who had been released earlier, promised that she was trying to prove their innocence. She said that Hayes might seem tough on the outside, but he actually cares deeply about everyone. The withering of the forest had forced him to make harsh decisions. Ariake remarked that the forest was testing its leader, Hayes. Just then, they felt a tremor from outside. Ariake confirmed that the abnormalities in the forest had intensified. The tremors shaking the village turned out to be from a landslide that had buried it, swallowing many houses. The commander rushed in looking for Hayes and was relieved to see the Great King was alive and well. However, she was also worried about the disaster unfolding in the village. She revealed that they were trying to rescue those who were trapped, but they were short on manpower and the village was in a state of panic. Hayes was overwhelmed as people kept approaching him, expecting him to provide a solution. He still hadn't seen his sister and didn't know if she was safe, making it impossible for him to think clearly. One villager begged Hayes to rescue their trapped child while others urged him to order a full evacuation of the village to save everyone's lives. Hayes despaired, concluding that he himself was the cause of the forest's decay. During the landslide, the forest had probably rejected him. And yet everyone was still looking to him, awaiting his next command. Hayes resolved to save his village even if the forest had rejected him. The least he could do was lead the village through the current crisis. He announced that they would not abandon anyone and ordered the soldiers to rescue people from the houses, evacuating the elderly and children first. As the soldiers followed their king's orders, Hayes personally rescued the trapped child, much to the mother's joy. But just as things seemed to be looking up, another landslide began, this time heading straight for Hayes. Hayes tried to stop it with his Wind King barrier, but the skill was useless in this situation. Just as he was about to give up, suddenly, someone from behind completely stopped the landslide. It was the walking disaster himself, Ariake. Ariake combined his skills: time stop, gravity control, shock absorption, and force projection, activating all four at once to push back the landslide. The villagers were saved by the walking disaster. What a great irony. Shortly after, Princess Sarah and Colette appeared, and Hayes was immensely relieved to see his sister was safe. Hayes felt lucky that Ariake had gotten out in time. He expressed his deep gratitude to Ariake for saving the village and promised to thank him properly later. However, Hayes also pointed out that they still needed to rescue those trapped from the first landslide. The rescue seemed like it would take a long time, so Ariake activated his muscle enhancement skill, giving the elves extra energy to work and lift the large boulders off the ground. Not long after, the elf village, led by Hayes, officially held a celebration to honor Ariake for saving them. Ariake wasn't the type to seek public recognition, but Hayes insisted that he stay to be honored. The proud Great King also offered an apology, though it wasn't easy for him, for putting Ariake and Colette through so much trouble. Hayes blamed himself for not being a good leader and believed he was the cause of the disaster. Ariake corrected the king, saying the landslide was caused by an accumulation of miasma, which happens when the forest isn't properly cared for. According to Ariake, every tree in the elf forest needs to be properly pruned. The density of the trees had blocked sunlight from getting through and allowed the miasma to spread. Hayes suddenly remembered why he had stopped thinning the forest a few years ago. Bibia had irresponsibly advised him to stop. At first, everything was fine for a few years, but now things hadn't turned out as expected. Hearing this, Ariake still blamed himself for not properly advising Babia's group. After all, he still indirectly blamed himself for the village's troubles. It was time to leave, though Princess Sarah tried everything to make Ariake stay, much to Colette's annoyance. The commander promised to send a report to the kingdom, to hold Babia accountable for his reckless actions. Ariake said his goodbyes to Princess Sarah, praising her for having all the qualities of a good leader, and he was sure that the next time they met, Sarah would have become a great leader. After that, they left the elf forest. Meanwhile, Alicia continued her journey in search of Ariake. She had become more experienced at traveling alone, and compared to before, it was quite pleasant. The only person she missed now was Ariake, and she wished he were with her on this journey. As she was talking to herself, her spirit beast, Fenrir, appeared, wondering why she said she was traveling alone when he was with her. They continued on their journey, and Alicia revealed that her Ariake radar had picked up traces indicating he had passed through the area not long ago. Fenrir also agrees that the place has traces of a great power source. Alicia isn't entirely convinced the traces belong to Ariake, but Fenrir points out that this power source is unusual for a human, much like Alicia's own power. Alicia asks Fenrir to speed up, As they still have a long way to go, Fenrir is astonished by Alicia's audacity to so casually order around a powerful being like itself. Meanwhile, Bibia's party is holding tryouts for adventurers interested in joining their group. However, the tryouts don't go as expected when no noteworthy adventurers show up. Bibia needs to complete his party to take on a D-rank quest, which he must complete to get his sword back, as required by the Imperial capital. Their party also needs a healer to replace Alicia. Elga points out that news of Bibia's cowardice might have spread, making skilled adventurers hesitant to join. But Bibia's pride gets in the way, and he chooses to blame the flyers Elga printed instead. He also complains that Basta, the porter hired the other day, isn't a good choice. But Basta was only hired to support the party, and Bibia only wants female members, which might explain why he dislikes Basta. Basta, after finishing organizing the party's luggage, openly questions whether he should stay or leave, especially since the flyer specified they needed female members. They encourage Basta to stay, but it's really because he does so much work for them. Purara enters with 2 guests whom Bibia assumes are there for the tryouts. The 2 adventurers ask if he's Bibia, which makes him feel proud as he confirms that yes, he is the one. However, he's taken by surprise when they start laughing at him, calling him the fool who lost his holy sword. The 2 adventurers continue to mock him, but the final straw is when they declare that Ariake is better than him. They reveal that they were part of the great battle in the medicine town and recount Ariake's heroic deeds. How he appeared when the royal knights were dead and all hope was lost, and how he easily defeated the Goblin King when it appeared. By the time Bibia finally throws them out, the seeds of discontent have been sown in his heart. Purara suggests that they should apologize to Ariake, pointing out that his unique skill is God of Buffs, which explains why they were stronger with him than without him. Bibia angrily declares that he has no intention of apologizing to Ariake, and that anyone who wants to leave and apologize is free to do so. Soon the whole party starts arguing about whether or not to apologize to Ariake. In the end, they decide to side with Bibia for now, but only for now. As the arguments continue, they hear another knock on the door. Bibia angrily goes to open it, thinking it's the guys who were boasting about Ariake again, and he's ready to teach them a lesson. But he's pleasantly surprised to see a familiar face at the door, Lorelei Cornelia, the nun. Lorelei had gone on quests with the party as a temporary healer in the past, so she was very familiar with most of the group. Lorelei introduces herself to the new members like Basta, and excitedly greets the rest of the party. She also asks about Ariake and Alicia, and they let her know that those 2 aren't around at the moment. Bibia adds that no matter who leaves the party, everything will be fine as long as he's here. Lorelei recalls the fun memories of when she used to join them on quests in the past, and reminisces about them with each member of the party. She then reveals her intention to try out to become a new member of the party. Surprisingly, at least to her, they immediately accept her. Bibia tells Lorelei that she was chosen from dozens of applicants, making her feel even more special. With Lorelei present, the team's morale is lifted once again, and they are finally ready to take on their D-rank quest. A mission that should have been a piece of cake. Their quest takes place in the Edcock Forest, and the objective is to eliminate the wyvern that is settled by the lake. The terrain here is perfect for low-level monsters to breed, making it an ideal hunting ground for adventurers. Bibia, arrogant as ever, declares that this adventure is beneath him. However, the deeper they go into the forest, the more uneasy everyone feels. Finally, a C-rank manticore suddenly appears and attacks them. A C-rank monster against an S-rank adventurer like Bibia should have been a one-sided fight, right? Bibia attacks the monster, but to his surprise, it doesn't go down. Instead, it stabs him with its venomous tail, effectively taking Bibia out of the fight. Delia tries to shoot the monster down, but the beast is too fast and dodges all of her arrows. The group screamed at her to aim more accurately, but their coordination and tactics were clearly far from impressive. Lorelei stood on the sidelines, wondering what had happened to the powerful team she once knew. In the end, the party managed to defeat the monster, securing a victory, but their performance was nothing short of embarrassing. Lorelei couldn't stay silent any longer, and stepped forward to ask why things were so different from the last time she'd joined them. Take a guess, Lorelei. To save face, Bibia made up a story, saying everyone felt off because it was their first mission with the new lineup, and they weren't used to each other yet. Elga and Delia went along with it, even though they knew it wasn't the truth. Purara tried to sneak away from the group, claiming she had a stomachache. But Bibia quickly saw through her lie. He demanded she lead the way and continue the journey, scolding her for trying to escape. Purara got angry and explained that she didn't want to stay because she was afraid they would use her as bait again, and she wanted to leave before that happened. Lorelai was surprised and asked Purara about being used as bait. Elga tried to calm the situation, assuring Purara there was nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, Basta tried to convince Purara that the problem wasn't as small as she thought. However, Purara simply trusted the hero party's words, assuming that if they said it was nothing, then everything would be fine. Bibia was surprised by Lorelai's naivety when talking about the life of an adventurer. Shortly after, the party members started to feel itchy all over their skin. Basta suspected the cause was insect bites and looked for Chex's insect repellent, only to find that it had run out of magic power, MP. Basta informed Bibia that black flies had appeared after they ran out of repellent. These black flies were magical insects from the forest that bite people and drain their MP, leaving behind intensely itchy welts. Bibia told Basta to quickly get more insect repellent. But Basta surprised him by saying they were completely out. Bibia scolded Basta for not bringing enough, but Basta reminded him that it was Bibia himself who had told him not to bring much before they set off. Bibia tried to shift the blame to Basta, saying he should have brought more anyway, and he brought up how Ariake had never run short on supplies during their adventures. This astonished Basta because, while it was common to overpack, never running out of supplies seemed impossible to him. Lorelai agreed, explaining that running out of supplies is inevitable, which is why both the leader and the porter must prepare thoroughly together. She stressed that having the necessary items can mean the difference between success and failure on an adventure. Lorelai added that the party's leader must decide what to bring, based on the quest's difficulty and the party's strength. She said that behind every great porter is a great leader, and concluded by asking why Bibia hadn't done a good job of it this time, when he had always prepared so well before that they never ran out of items. Bibia started to get annoyed and replied that sometimes things don't go smoothly, and that the insects were just a minor nuisance. Lorelai smiled and gently said it was okay. She was just worried about his struggles. Bibia reassured her that there was no need to worry. Lorelai apologized and offered to provide more insect repellent for the whole party. At first, Bibia almost refused out of pride, but the rest of the members quickly accepted it with gratitude. A moment later, they spotted the wyvern and immediately hid behind some bushes. Lorelai suggested they make a plan, but the rest of the party rushed forward instead. She wondered why they were in such a hurry, and Bibia explained that they wanted to finish the quest quickly. The party came up with a hasty plan. Whoever hit the wyvern first would be the winner. Lorelai was surprised and disagreed, stressing that they needed to consider unexpected factors in their adventures. She reminded them that their previous encounter only covered basic attacks, ignoring factors like terrain, weather, stamina, and other surprises. Lorelai pointed out that even if they only saw one wyvern, there could be others nearby, and they hadn't yet explored all their tactical options. Bibia tried to reassure her as the party's hero, but Lorelai cut him off, asking why they were ignoring the clever tactics from their previous quest. The party members looked confused by her words. Lorelai emphasized that completing a quest isn't just about individual strength, but also about using a strategy that combines everyone's skills, including offense, defense, and support, to achieve a better outcome. Bibia started to feel insulted, asking if Lorelai was implying that tactics were more important than their strength, and he wondered if she was looking down on him. Lorelai explained that it was just common sense. She reminded him that his clever strategies in the past had earned their party praise. However, the other party members just looked even more confused. Lorelai asked if they remembered the battle with the behemoth. Basta excitedly recalled that he'd heard about that famous battle, while Bibia seemed vague. Lorelai recounted what happened on the day they defeated the behemoth, and Basta added that they had finished the battle in just a few hours, which was the very reason he wanted to join the hero's party. Lorelai reminded them that after that battle, their hero party became known as brilliant strategists. The others looked puzzled by this, as it felt strange and unfamiliar to them. Bibia began to ponder the strategy Lorelai had mentioned, as they had just been fighting aimlessly without a plan. Suddenly, Bibia recalled leaving everything related to support to Ariake during their fierce battle with the behemoth. He vividly remembered how Ariake's strategy had saved them that day. However, even though he now understood the truth, Bibia stubbornly refused to accept it, clinging to his denial. Lorelai cut through his thoughts, pointing out that, as she recalled, Ariake had handled all the preparations by himself. and led them through the entire battle from start to finish. But now Ariake was gone. She skillfully and coldly asked if Ariake's absence was the reason they had become such a weak and pathetic group. Finally, the party was forced to confront the truth they had been avoiding for so long. Delia got angry with Lorelai for calling their group pathetic. Lorelai apologized, explaining that the word had just slipped out unintentionally, but their conversation was abruptly interrupted by Bibia, who suddenly panicked and burst into tears. He dropped to his knees and began to wail. Lorelai, instead of diffusing the situation, remarked that not even a rookie adventurer would cry like that in front of an enemy. Delia told her to stop, urging her to see the impact of her words. Elga stepped in to comfort and soothe Bibia, while Parara coldly sneered at Bibia for crying over Lorelai's words, forcing everyone else to try and console him. Parara made things worse by mocking him, saying he was a useless and clumsy hero, and that crying on the ground was a perfect fit for someone like him. She added that this was payback for him abandoning her in the cave, causing Bibia to cry even louder, like a child who just had his candy stolen. Elga scolded Parara for teasing Bibia when he was already breaking down, and Delia also came to his defense. Parara continued to insult them for abandoning her, and the situation seemed to be getting worse and worse. Basta decided to leave the group and go home. He told everyone they could do whatever they wanted, as he didn't care and had no desire to stay in what he considered a foolish party. Elga warned Delia that if Basta left, strange rumors might start spreading again. Delia understood this and said she would go after Basta. Lorelai wondered aloud if they were really going to split up while in pursuit of an enemy, but they told her to shut up because they were busy. Parara told Lorelai that if it came down to it, they would use the hero as bait. Lorelai rushed over to Bibia and tried to get a response from him, but it seemed he had lost his mind. Meanwhile, Lorelai slapped Bibia hard across the face, shaking him and telling him to snap out of it. Through his tears, he begged her to apologize to him, which she found disgusting. Lorelai told Bibia she had given up on him and didn't want to believe it, but every single member of the party was selfish, and that the group didn't deserve to be called the Heroes Party. Hearing this, Bibia sank deeper into paranoia, showing signs of losing his sanity, threatening to kill anyone who dared to mock him. He unleashed a massive surge of energy from his sword. Parara warned Lorelai that Bibia was about to use his final sword technique. Curious, Parara asked about the technique, and Elga explained that it was one of the hero's most powerful skills, consuming over half his MP and capable of slicing through a vast area, destroying everything, including wyverns and even themselves. Lorelai panicked, realizing the importance of the Edcock Forest to the kingdom. She urgently ordered everyone to stop Bibia before he destroyed the forest. However, she was dismayed to see Parara and Elga run for their lives, leaving her behind. Meanwhile, Bibia activated his final sword technique, resulting in a massive explosion that could be seen from the air. Hours later, the party members found themselves locked in a prison cell. Bibia immediately protested, demanding to be released and questioning if this was how they treated a hero. The guard sarcastically retorted, calling them criminals and telling them to shut up. Bibia argued that they'd been tasked by the kingdom to slay a wyvern, and not only did they not receive thanks, but now they were imprisoned. The guard, filled with disgust, asked why they deserved any thanks. He explained that the lake in Edcock Forest was crucial to the kingdom, and that trading it just to kill one wyvern was insane. Furthermore, plenty of adventurers passed through that area daily, and someone could have been hurt in Bibia's explosion. The guard told them to reflect on what they'd done while they waited for their punishment. Just then, Lorelai spoke up, saying she was the one who had tried to stop Bibia. She explained that she had nothing to do with the forest's destruction, and had actually tried to prevent the damage Bibia caused. She insisted that if it weren't for her, things could have been much worse. Bibia, furious, asked if she was just trying to save her own skin. The guard considered Lorelai's plea and checked the party's records. It turned out Lorelai wasn't even listed as an official member of the group. Lorelai pressed her attack, saying she barely knew Bibia and the others. Things got even worse when the other members, including Basta, denied causing any damage, pinning all the blame on Bibia. They didn't stand by him at all. The guard listened and assumed they'd all been injured trying to stop Bibia, so he decided to detain only Bibia. Everyone agreed with the guard, enraging Bibia. Elga said they would wait for Bibia outside, and Parara mockingly reminded him to think about what he'd done. Basta and Lorelai sarcastically said their goodbyes. Bibia tried to warn them that he wouldn't let them get away with this. But just then, Prime Minister Wardock from the Gronheim Kingdom appeared and cut him off. He explained that he was nearby on business and it seemed their imprisonment was a mistake. Wardog ordered the guard to release them immediately. After they were freed, Wardog told Bibia he wanted to have a word with him, and suggested the whole party share a meal. He promised to prepare a grand feast for Bibia and the group at the royal palace. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Ariake and Colette arrived in the charming olden town, both amazed by its beauty. But then, a woman accidentally splashed dirty water on Ariake, soaking his clothes. She quickly apologized, explaining she'd been too focused on watering her flowers. Ariake paid it no mind and walked on, but he later confessed to Colette that the incident, happening right after they arrived, felt like a bad omen. Ariake admitted he couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. Despite the streets being decorated with beautiful flowers, he just couldn't feel at ease. He noticed the town looked unusually tidy, almost unnaturally so. Colette asked him if things being too clean was a problem. Ariake replied that it wasn't necessarily bad, but it made him wonder where all the trash went. Just then, he saw the shadow of someone rushing into a dark alley. However, their attention was diverted by a crowd that suddenly flooded the streets. The two tried to get out of the crowd's way, and after some jostling, they finally broke free. As a result, Ariake nearly bumped into a man on horseback. The man, who was Heinrich Gross, immediately demanded to know why Ariake was approaching him. He scolded Ariake, calling him a commoner, and arrogantly asked if Ariake had come to hear his speech. Heinrich mentioned he would be discussing his upcoming policies to maintain the city's beauty at the nearby square. As he rode off, he urged Ariake to listen carefully to his speech. This piqued Ariake's curiosity, and he decided to go with Colette to see what this wonderful policy Heinrich mentioned was all about. Heinrich began his speech by riling up the crowd, getting them excited and impressing them with sweet words. The crowd cheered enthusiastically, praising his benevolence. After the opening, Heinrich got straight to the point. He told everyone that the only problem plaguing their beautiful city was the poor who refused to pay taxes, especially the beastmen, who he claimed were the worst offenders because of their strength and animalistic instincts. Heinrich assured the crowd that he would protect them from this threat, and declared the need to cleanse the slums and suppress all the beastmen in the city. The crowd grew even more frenzied, showing their fervent support. Heinrich signaled for everyone to calm down and prepared for his next announcement. Heinrich then invited representatives from the city's districts to share their opinions. The first to stand was the area chief, who complained about a recent increase in theft in his district and asked Heinrich for help. However, a guard interjected, telling him to solve it himself. The area chief argued that the problem had gotten too big for them to handle on their own. The guard tried to make it seem as though Heinrich wasn't concerned with such trivial matters, but he stopped them and said that he wanted his people to live in peace no matter how big or small the issue. The crowd cheered even louder, but Ariake realized Heinrich was just putting on a show to win the people's trust. Heinrich told the area chief that there were many beastmen living in his district, implying they were the ones causing trouble. Heinrich asked why they hadn't dealt with the beastmen yet, and the area chief explained that they needed the beastmen's strength because it was an industrial district. Heinrich asked if they were profiting from illegal labor, and the area chief denied this. Profiting from illegal labor, which the regional chief denies. Heinrich insists that he wants to create a city free from criminal labor, and says they must eliminate all beast tribes. Ultimately, the regional chief agrees. This leaves Ariake feeling unsettled, as even the dissenters eventually had to agree with Heinrich. Next, the guildmaster of Olden City arrives and complains that the adventurer killer has returned, murdering 10 adventurers this month alone. Colette panics upon hearing about the adventurer killer, and a man in the crowd, realizing they are adventurers, warns them to be careful. He says the hero killer only hunts adventurers, and his true identity remains a mystery, making him incredibly dangerous. Heinrich admits that he was previously unable to capture the killer when he confronted him. But this time, even if the killer is present in the crowd, he is determined to find and deal with him. Finally, Heinrich spots Ariake and Colette in the crowd and takes notice of them. He learns of Ariake's identity and doesn't hesitate to announce it to the crowd. Everyone in the crowd begins to mock Ariake for being exiled from the hero's party. However, Heinrich feigns politeness and asks the crowd not to be insulting. Heinrich offers Ariake a private tour of the city as a gesture of goodwill. Colette tries to refuse Heinrich's invitation, but Ariake accepts and explains that he wants to see where the city disposes of its trash as they tour the beautiful city. Ariake becomes curious as to why Heinrich, who seems so heavily guarded, would need a luxurious sword like the one he's holding. The guards correct Ariake, revealing that Heinrich is actually a master swordsman. Ariake asks to touch the sword, but is scolded. He apologizes, and Heinrich quickly changes the subject, trying to charm Colette with flirtatious words. However, Colette bluntly refuses and even calls him a third-rate politician. Heinrich is angered, but skillfully hides it. He shifts his attention to a poor man who accidentally bumps into them. The guards attack the man for getting in the way, and he begs for forgiveness. Colette tries to persuade Heinrich to stop, but he still orders the guards to deal with the man. Ariake secretly uses a speed-enhancing spell to help the man move faster and escape danger. Afterwards, Heinrich brings up a public execution he has planned for some members of the beast tribe he has captured, and suggests they all attend. At the execution site, 2 beast tribe siblings, a brother and a sister, are in chains, preparing to face their grim fate. Heinrich's guards treat the 2 beast tribe siblings cruelly, prompting Colette to intervene, reminding them that the 2 are just children. Heinrich explains that the beast tribe siblings openly opposed his policies and must be punished as an example to others. He orders the guards to stone the 2 children to death. However, something strange happens. A mysterious barrier appears, protecting the siblings from the stones. Heinrich turns and sees that Ariake was the one controlling the barrier. Heinrich scolds Ariake for daring to defy his orders to protect the beast tribe, but Ariake retorts, asserting that the only real beast here is Heinrich. Unable to contain his rage, Heinrich orders Ariake's arrest and declares that he will face death. However, before dealing with Ariake, Heinrich decides to finish off the beast tribe siblings first and orders his guards to kill them. As the guards approach, an unseen force pushes them away, causing them to fall to the ground unconscious. Ariake recognizes that this type of magic is a powerful barrier that can destroy anything it touches, and he knows only one person with such a skill. Just then, Saintess Alicia appears, making a grand entrance. Alicia steps forward and asks what Heinrich has to explain. Everyone is surprised to see her. Confidently, she walks over to Ariake and demands the guards release him. Heinrich tries to persuade Alicia to leave the execution area with sweet words, but she points her staff at him and says the church had informed her that he was discriminating against the beast tribe in the city, which goes against their religion. Heinrich was shocked to learn that the order came directly from the church. Alicia explained that according to the teachings of Brigadism, racial discrimination is strictly forbidden. However, Heinrich openly challenged their faith. Heinrich noticed the crowd starting to murmur, so he declared loudly that what he was doing wasn't discrimination, but punishing criminals, and that the church had no right to interfere with his justice. Alicia revealed that she had investigated and discovered that Heinrich had raised taxes and confiscated people's property, and that anyone who opposed him met a grim fate. Alicia declared that, as the great saintess of the Brigitte Church, it was her sacred duty to recommend Heinrich's excommunication. This shocked everyone present. Colette noticed everyone becoming tense, and Ariake explained that since Brigadism is the state religion, the church's word is law. Everyone here trusts the church above all else. Ariake noticed Heinrich starting to worry, as he knew that if he were excommunicated, he would lose all his power. Finally, Heinrich decided to back down, claiming he was only considering releasing the 2 beastkin siblings. Alicia stepped forward to heal the beastkin siblings' wounds. Heinrich tried to sneak away, but Alicia quickly caught him and demanded he apologize to both the beastkin siblings and Ariake. At first, Heinrich refused to apologize to Ariake, but a stern look from Alicia made him concede. Heinrich finally apologized and left in shame. After Heinrich left, Alicia became emotional and flustered, being alone with Ariake for the first time in a long while. Her dreamy thoughts were interrupted when she finally noticed Colette standing behind Ariake. Unable to contain her curiosity, Alicia asked about Colette. Colette introduced herself, and Alicia was taken aback by how adorable and cute Colette was. However, she couldn't help but feel a slight pang of jealousy, as in her eyes, Colette had a charming smile and a petite, cute figure. The complete opposite of Alicia herself. Alicia started to worry about becoming the third wheel in their group. Interestingly, on the other side, Colette was also jealous of Alicia's beauty. She was amazed by Alicia's radiant appearance, so much so that she believed Alicia could even charm unique beings like the dragonkin she belonged to. Colette felt overwhelmed by Alicia's almost superhuman aura, and also wondered how to handle the situation. Especially since Ariake had mentioned having a reliable companion, but she never expected it to be someone like Alicia. Ariake broke the tension by asking about the others and why Alicia was alone. Alicia admitted that she had left Bibia's group. This surprised Ariake, and Alicia confessed that she had been following him ever since she left the hero's party, hoping she could join his. Ariake thought about it for a moment, then asked Colette for her opinion. Colette became a little anxious, wondering if Ariake was testing her. Alicia had the amusing thought that maybe Ariake was dating Colette, which was why he was asking for her opinion. Noticing Colette seemed unsure of what to say, Alicia decided to take the initiative and tell Colette about her skills, hoping to resolve the situation more cheerfully and naturally. Colette found Alicia's introduction impressive and praised her for being skilled in both healing and advanced resurrection magic. Colette also shared where she was from and talked about her own abilities. Both girls admired each other but also felt a hint of jealousy. In the end, they decided to accept one another because they both held a great deal of mutual respect. Both Alicia and Colette were happy that they could now stay by Ariake's side without any worries. Ariake knew they were both stubborn, but he was surprised to see them get along so quickly. Just then, the Beastkin siblings they had saved earlier approached and thanked them for their help. The boy introduced himself as Hao and his little sister as Anne. Hao sincerely promised he would never forget Ariake's kindness. Ariake humbly suggested sharing the thanks with Alicia, offering her half the credit. Anne was curious about their future plans. Ariake inquired, and Hao assured them that the two of them would continue their adventure and wouldn't let someone like Heinrich diminish their love for the city. Alicia vowed to ensure that Heinrich would learn his lesson and that the two children would always be happy. They admitted they were still worried about the adventurer killer, but found comfort in their present happiness. Ariake expressed relief knowing the church was monitoring the town's situation, but he still felt something was off about the look in Heinrich's eyes. As Hao and Anne were about to leave, Ariake called out to them, making everyone wonder what he was thinking. Meanwhile, in his office, Heinrich Gross was repeatedly slamming his head against his desk, so hard that it started to bleed, all while cursing Ariake. He was uncontrollably furious at the thought that Ariake dared to look down on a high-ranking noble like him, when all Ariake had really done was stop rocks from falling on the Beastkin. The rage sent Heinrich throwing books across the room. He wondered why it was wrong to kill the Beastkin when he was convinced their very existence was a sin. Not only that, he was outraged that the great Saintess Tess had taken their side, and even threatened to excommunicate him, a nobleman, from the church. He kept screaming that they would regret their actions and that he would make them pay. After his outburst, Heinrich's office was a complete mess. He realized the church would be watching him more closely now, and that he needed to deal with this problem before it was too late. Smirking, Heinrich drew his sword and reassured himself that even if he lost his power, he still had his blade. Suddenly, the door opened and one of the guards walked in. Heinrich reported that they would handle the adventurer killer case, but first, he needed to check if anyone suspicious had entered the Purgatory Temple. Hearing this, the guard handed Heinrich a list of adventurers. As he looked at the list, a cunning smile spread across his face. He told the guard to prepare the cavalry for the next day and then left. Heinrich was overjoyed to see Hao's and Anne's names on the list. Looking at his sword, he said confidently that luck was finally on his side. At the Purgatory Temple, Heinrich and his knight squad, Lion, were waiting. As Heinrich reviewed the list, a knight reported that they hadn't seen any suspicious adventurers while watching the temple. Looking down, Heinrich spotted Hao and Anne, and another wicked smile appeared on his face. He then ordered his guards to enter the temple. Inside the temple, one of the adventurers worriedly asked if they were safe with the adventurer killer on the loose. His companion reassured him, saying they'd be fine and that he shouldn't worry about some urban legend. Besides, the value of loot from the temple had skyrocketed, which eased the adventurer's worries. But he still wanted to leave as soon as possible. Suddenly, out of nowhere, his companion was stabbed by a mysterious man in a cloak. The stranger mocked the body, laughing as he said, "How does it feel to be killed by an urban legend?" The adventurer realized the attacker was the adventurer killer. The man stabbed the adventurer in the leg, mocking that no one would come to save him, and that it would be a shame if anyone interrupted his fun. The adventurer tried to fight back, and in the struggle he pulled back the cloak, revealing the killer to be none other than Heinrich. With a look of disgust, Heinrich said that since the adventurer had seen his face, he certainly couldn't let him live. Heinrich cut the adventurer down while laughing maniacally. He said that the adventurers should be grateful that even trash like them could make his sword stronger, as its sharpness increased with the amount of blood it absorbed. Afterward, Heinrich decided to go find Hao and Anne. Elsewhere in the temple, the two Beastkin siblings were continuing on their journey. Anne remarked that the atmosphere in here felt creepier than usual today. Hao decided they would rest for a bit, then told Anne he was going to scout ahead a little. Anne agreed, saying she would wait for him nearby. Heinrich overheard their conversation and decided this was his chance to kill Anne. planning to torture Hao later. But just as he was about to make his move, Hao suddenly appeared out of nowhere and punched him hard, sending him flying. Confused, Heinrich demanded to know how Hao had managed to approach him without being detected. Just then, Colette took off the dog ears on her head, revealing she'd been pretending to be Anne the whole time, while the real Anne was standing behind Heinrich. Ariake then appeared, leaving Heinrich in complete shock. Ariake was surprised at how smoothly the plan went, though he admitted he'd been worried about it. He explained that after hearing Heinrich's speech about the adventurer killer, he found it odd that Heinrich specified the killer was among the adventurers, when it could have been anyone. On top of that, it was also strange for someone like Heinrich to be doing this kind of dirty work himself. With those clues, Ariake concluded that Heinrich was using the hunt for the adventurer killer as a pretext to continue his own slaughter. Heinrich tried to deny the accusations, but the supposedly dead adventurers, revived by Alicia's magic, claimed otherwise. Colette then drew everyone's attention to the sword Heinrich was using, a blade that seemed to grow more sinister with each kill. She explained she hadn't realized it at first because the sword was sheathed. Alicia turned to Heinrich, calling him a criminal. She declared that for the crimes he'd committed, no excuses would be accepted, and that once he was exposed, he would lose everything. Heinrich began to tremble and mutter something, unnoticed by the others. The sword at Colette's feet also began to vibrate, and he screamed that they would all pay. The sword suddenly flew back to Heinrich in a large explosion, and it had now transformed into a powerful demon sword. Heinrich said he would show them the true power of his demon sword. He threatened that for daring to insult him, they would all die by this blade. Ariake tried to warn Heinrich, telling him the sword was actually a monster, but it was too late. Suddenly, tentacles began to sprout from Heinrich's body. As he screamed in agony, Colette asked what exactly that sword was, and Ariake explained it was a mimic, a monster that can disguise itself as an item and devour adventurers to grow stronger. As the mimic let out a horrifying roar, it began to chaotically throw rocks at the group, and its tentacles multiplied. Alicia warned that if this mimic got any faster, they'd be in serious trouble. Colette was confused as she thought mimics were low-level monsters. Ariake explained that with enough souls, a mimic can evolve into a hell mimic, a monster classified as triple S rank, which is incredibly dangerous. The hell mimic then unleashed a shockwave, overwhelming the group of adventurers. Colette said the shockwave probably knocked everyone unconscious. Alicia noticed that the monster's attacks were rather slow, meaning it probably hadn't fully absorbed Heinrich yet. After telling the other adventurers to fall back, Ariake told Colette and Alicia to prepare for battle. At first, Colette was a little annoyed, as the plan seemed to be just to hold the monster off. But Ariake clarified that they were going to destroy it, and that he would give them his full support. Hearing that, Colette and Alicia became excited, declaring that with Ariake by their side, there was no way they could lose. Ariake warned them not to get too carried away and not to stray too far, or his buffs might not reach them in time. Hao told Ariake he would help evacuate the others. Since that was the most he could do right now, Ariake placed a hand on Hao's shoulder, reassuring him that he was a much better adventurer than he gave himself credit for. As Ariake revived the remaining adventurers and Hao left, the three of them stood ready to face the Hell Mimic. The Hell Mimic let out a booming laugh, promising to kill Ariake. As the group charged forward, Ariake reminded them to keep a tight formation and not stray too far to ensure the buffs would work. Ariake started with Colette, granting her several buffs: Burst Invincibility, Speed Burst, and Evasion Burst. He warned that while the buffs were powerful, they were short-lived, and she should retreat after attacking. Colette charged in to face the Mimic. Ariake turned and told her that his buff only lasted for 45 seconds, and asked her to put up a barrier before the buff expired. Colette dodged its attack with ease. She taunted it, saying its large size made it predictable. Finding a weak spot, Colette landed a powerful punch on the monster, then immediately retreated. However, the Mimic grew a mouth right where Colette had struck and nearly bit her. At that moment, the group realized that attacking the monster was only making it stronger. Ariake told Colette to keep luring the monster as another mouth began to form. Colette kicked the monster and continued to evade all of its attacks, proudly boasting that it couldn't touch her thanks to Ariake's buffs. As the Hell Mimic glared at Ariake with one of its giant eyes, it tried to attack him, but the barrier was set up just in time, protecting him from the blow. Alicia asked Ariake to use his skills on himself, but Ariake said that even though he'd anticipated the Mimic would attack him, he wanted to conserve his magic. Alicia was still worried about him, saying he could have been hurt. Ariake replied that would never happen, not as long as she was there to support him. He reminded her that she'd saved him countless times back when they were in the hero's party, and that as long as he had her, everything would be fine. Alicia began to tremble, her face flushing with embarrassment, and thought to herself that Ariake could still tease her even in the middle of a battle. She shouted that she couldn't focus on maintaining the barrier when he was looking at her like that. Ariake quickly apologized, thinking he'd upset her again. Meanwhile, the mimic continued to slam its tentacles against the barrier, trying to break through. Ariake reassured them that they still had time before the barrier broke, and that he was about to reveal the mimic's weakness. He explained that although it looked like it was getting stronger on the outside, it was just a bluff. He pointed out that the tentacles around the damaged area were moving slower, showing that even though the mimic was resilient, it was definitely weaker in the areas that had been hurt. Ariake pointed out that the mimic's mouth was just a trick to make them think it had gotten stronger, but it was actually just a ploy to buy itself time to recover. Fighting with deception wasn't unusual for mimics. Alicia still noted that while that was true, the mimic recovered incredibly fast. Ariake agreed, saying that its regenerative ability was the key to finding its weakness. If the mimic was using its mouth to hide its wounds, then perhaps if they struck the same spot twice, it wouldn't be able to recover. After reaching that conclusion, Ariake said that the only way to attack the mimic before it could regenerate was to use a multi-strike attack to continuously hit the same spot to deplete its energy. Even though the damage wouldn't change, they could still hit it multiple times in a row. Right after that, the barrier began to crack and finally shattered. The trio moved quickly, dodging a tentacle that slammed down where they had just been standing. Ariake said they had to destroy the mimic before it destroyed the entire dungeon. Ariake buffed the whole party, giving Alicia lightning speed, agility to Colette, and the multi-strike skill for himself. With those preparations, he faced the mimic, ready to end the battle. The mimic roared, screaming Ariake's name. But before it could attack, Colette landed 3 hits, causing one of its tentacles to fall off. Alicia continued to strike the mimic hard with her staff, making another tentacle drop. Ariake's plan was proving to be very effective. He joined them, and the 3 of them began to relentlessly attack the mimic. Ariake told the monster that since it was so good at absorbing damage, they would see what they could do about that. They continued their barrage of attacks, until Ariake finally called out that they were running out of time. But Alicia corrected him, saying they were right on time, because no matter how hard it tried, the mimic couldn't create or maintain any more tentacles. However, just as they were about to finish it off, the mimic started to flee. The trio gave chase, and outside, the mimic looked for people to devour to recover. Ariake calmly stated that all the adventurers had already left, thanks to the beastkin the mimic had tortured. Alicia worried that the mimic would get away, but Ariake had anticipated this. He told Colette to go wild, and she transformed into her dragon form, ready to deliver the final judgment on the hell mimic. Colette unleashed her final fury on the mimic, causing it to completely disintegrate, leaving a giant crater in the aftermath of the attack. She then returned to her normal form and fell to the ground, but Ariake caught her as always. He was a little annoyed that she didn't hold back, but Colette argued that it felt amazing to use her full power. Alicia ran over to Colette, amazed by her true form. She complimented Colette on how divine she looked in her dragon form, but also thought to herself that now, with Colette in the group, she would have to try much harder. Although Ariake noticed Alicia seemed sad, she just said that the last skill took a lot out of her. Colette was still happy about how amazing the fight was, and Alicia agreed, saying it was all thanks to Ariake. However, Ariake humbly said that wasn't true, as his skills were only effective because of his excellent teammates, and that without them, they would have lost. Alicia sighed and said that, although there was still conflict between the beastkin and the townspeople, at least they had dealt with the adventurer killer. She then told Ariake that she didn't think Heinrich acted alone and might have been controlled by a mastermind. However, Colette wasn't too worried about this, telling everyone they could figure it out later. And for now, they should just enjoy the moment since the case was solved. Upon returning to Oldentown, Ariake and his friends were warmly welcomed as the heroes who defeated Heinrich. Despite being grateful, Ariake still tried to escape the attention, as he stealthily avoided the eager townspeople looking for him. Hao and Anne caught Ariake as he was trying to hide from the town's hospitality. They both found it hard to believe that a party could be too much for a legendary hero. The siblings gave Ariake the Bell of Dawn, a bell capable of summoning all the members of their tribe for help when needed. At first, Ariake tried to refuse the gift, but after much persuasion, he decided to keep it, though he still told them not to expect him to use it. Afterward, Alicia informed Ariake that she would have to leave the party for a while because church officials had contacted her and wanted to see her in person. Ariake said that sounded like a pain, and Alicia replied that it was all his fault, since she had to go back to express her gratitude for what he'd done, and she also had to report in person. Ariake wasn't sure if she was mad at him, but Alicia continued, saying they also wanted him to come along to properly show their gratitude. With a hint of annoyance, Ariake said he didn't want to, and Alicia giggled, saying she knew he'd say that since he always hated being the center of attention. Ariake was surprised to see Alicia so cheerful, and said it had been a long time since he'd seen her so happy. Alicia then left, saying she had already informed Colette. Ariake wished her a safe journey, which made Alicia blush unexpectedly. Fenrir, now in her human form, appeared beside Ariake and confirmed his suspicions about a mastermind behind the recent events. She kissed him and said they would meet again, then vanished. As they continued their journey across the country, Colette remarked that it seemed they needed to plan an escape route. Ariake then announced they would head to the port city of Belta, as they needed to cross the sea to reach Alti. Meanwhile, Ariake pondered who the mastermind manipulating Heinrich could be. Not only that, but he also noticed that other events, like the decay of the fairy forest and the Devil's Grove in the medicine town, and even when he rescued Colette, all seemed to be the work of someone trying to spread darkness. On the way, as Ariake was talking about how he used to take care of the hero's party, Colette spotted some royal knights. The royal knights noticed their carriage and approached, informing Ariake that they had been waiting for him, and that they were there to deliver a royal decree from the kingdom of Gurunheim. They announced that he must participate in a royal duel against the hero, Harunoa Bibia, in Belta within the next month. Colette wondered why they would want Ariake for such a duel, and Ariake explained that kingdoms often do this to show off their people's strength. However, he had a feeling there was a deeper reason behind it. Colette told Ariake to ignore the decree and not let them push him around. The royal knights tried to object, saying one cannot refuse a royal decree, but after a few threats and insults from Colette, accompanied by her deathly cold glare, they fell silent. However, Ariake saw it as a chance to see how much the hero's party had grown in strength. Colette, slightly annoyed, said he was being too kind. Meanwhile, Ariake thought to himself that the hero's party had probably made many mistakes since he left, but that was the only way for them to truly grow. He believed this was what one would call a parent's love. Colette told the knights they should be grateful for Ariake's kindness, and Ariake told them to inform the king that he accepted the duel. At the Wardock residence, Bibia was utterly shocked to hear he had to duel Ariake. The Grand Chancellor, while sipping his tea, asked if he would accept the duel, smirking to himself because Bibia had previously worried that the feasts of wine and food were just special treatment to rope him into some terrible mission. Bibia confidently told the Grand Chancellor that he would win without any trouble. Delia chimed in, saying she was strong enough to defeat a weakling like Ariake. Elga added that Ariake was too soft and lacked muscle. Purara, while taking a bite of a sweet, said she'd love to put Ariake in his place. Suddenly, a young girl spoke up, asking why they were so relaxed about the situation. She said that against someone like Ariake, who saved the town of Medicine from the Devil's Grove, they would need to prepare more thoroughly. But Bibia immediately turned to the girl, Lorelei, and told her she was naive to believe such rumors, insisting that the town was saved by the kingdom's knights. He then looked to the Grand Chancellor for confirmation, and the Chancellor, with a calm expression, said, "That was just the public statement." When Bibia questioned him, the Chancellor said he couldn't say any more, out of respect for his position. After a moment of silence, Purara asserted that the adventurers only won because they were overwhelmingly strong, not because of Ariake, and that no one with half a brain would believe that rumor. Lorelei then said that if the rumors were true, then Ariake had done much more than just provide support. However, Bibia told her to shut up, and claimed that rumors always exaggerate things like that. Lorelei then said that she might leave the party, and the other new member agreed. Delia explained that leaving was pointless, because they were under the kingdom's authority, and if they left now, they'd be saddled with a massive debt from claims and damages. Hearing this, the girls fell into despair, which delighted Delia and Purara. The Grand Chancellor stated bluntly that the royal duel was designed to elevate their status as heroes, because right now, their reputation didn't live up to their role. He added that some people considered Ariake to be the true hero. He explained that if the public believed the destruction only happened because they were too powerful, then public opinion of them would change. Suddenly, Bibia crushed his wineglass in his hand, declaring that Ariake was weak and that he didn't care for fights where the outcome was already decided. However, he was willing to dispense justice like a hero. Bibia was convinced that Ariake being seen as a hero was just a lie Ariake told himself, and that he was just trying to get revenge for being kicked out of the party. He then told the Grand Chancellor that the royal duel sounded interesting, and he accepted, despite being certain of the outcome. As the Grand Chancellor rose from his seat, he told Bibia he was looking forward to the match. Then he paused and informed Bibia there was one more thing. He turned towards the door and called someone in. A boy carrying a spear entered, introducing himself to the hero party as Lacri. The Grand Chancellor explained that he wanted Bibia to take Lacri as his disciple within the hero party, which surprised and annoyed Bibia, because the boy wasn't a girl. Bibia then asked the Grand Chancellor to find someone else to look after the boy, but the Chancellor insisted that no one else could handle the task, because Lacri wields the holy spear, Brayanak, and since Bibia also possessed a holy weapon, he was the only one who could be trusted to train the boy. With some reluctance, Bibia took Lacri to an empty field, beginning his disciples' training session. Lacri, in a warm and appreciative voice, expressed his gratitude for the honor of receiving guidance from the hero himself. In response, Bibia coldly told Lacri to skip the excessive formalities, wanting to get the training over with quickly. Lacri eagerly charged at Bibia with his sword. But a single slight movement from Bibia caused Lacri to miss his mark and tumble to the ground. However, with unshakable determination, Lacri quickly got back up, declaring that he was just getting started and wasn't done yet. He charged at Bibia once more, who couldn't hide his annoyance as he braced for the predictable attack. Not far away, the hero party members Elga, Delia, and Purara were gathered around a table engaged in a leisurely card game. Lorelei, as usual, could be heard complaining about their choice to relax when they could be doing more heroic things. In a lighthearted tone, Delia responded with a playful excuse, suggesting they were actually resting and calling it a form of training. Lorelei took a moment to remind the group that to meet Ariake for the upcoming royal duel, they would have to head to the coastal city of Belta. However, their current activities seemed more focused on fun than preparation. Purara, with an exasperated sigh, voiced her annoyance at Lorelei's persistent seriousness. Purara still couldn't understand why everyone was making a big deal about treating Ariake as a serious opponent, when she herself wasn't ready to see him that way. Basta, ever the rational one, reassured Lorelei that there was no need to be so tense, as everyone was determined, and that at least Lacri seemed to have his head on straight about everything. Lorelei replied, admitting that Lacri's calm demeanor was actually what worried her. Meanwhile, in the training area, Lacri and Bibia continued their practice session. Somehow, Lacri had lost his sword, which was now stuck deep in the ground. With an embarrassed yet sincere look, he declared his intention to retrieve his sword and get back to the fight. Bibia thought back to his earlier conversation with the Grand Chancellor regarding Lacri. During that discussion, he had learned about Lacri possessing the holy sword Brayanak, and the Chancellor had entrusted Bibia with the responsibility of training him as a hero. However, the Grand Chancellor had also warned that over time, Lacri's power could surpass even that of the heroes. As Bibia watched Lacri now, he found it hard to believe such a scenario was possible. Lacri's movements were simple, slow, and painfully predictable, making Bibia wonder how his strength could surpass that of a seasoned hero. Bibia felt frustrated as he recalled his conversation with the Grand Chancellor, and he decided to use Lacri as a training dummy, beat him up, and then throw him out. The naive Lacri brought his spear back, and the arrogant Bibia immediately started bullying him. Lorelei intervened, arguing with Bibia for attacking Lacri without warning. Bibia retorted that a true warrior must never let their guard down in a real battle. Lacri thanked Bibia for teaching him that lesson, and said he was ready to continue the training session, but Lorelei worried that he was pushing himself too hard. Bibia continued to intensify the training, planning to knock Lacri out. He was a little surprised when the first blow wasn't enough to make Lacri pass out, but he was confident the second one would do the trick. As Bibia attacked, Lacri staggered but got back up. Bibia noticed that Lacri had used his spear to block the blow, but Lorelei saw something more. Lacri had intentionally redirected the impact and used his armor to absorb the rest of the damage, all in a split second. Bibia grew angrier and continued to ramp up the training, while the other members of the hero party began to consider intervening. Finally, Lacri fell to the ground, bruised and coughing violently. Lorelei offered to heal him if he was badly injured, while Bibia boasted about his amazing technique. Lacri praised his teacher, saying that Bibia was truly amazing, and that he was the one who was too slow to keep up. Lacri went into detail about how Bibia executed the first strike, pushing the sword down to lift himself up, then using momentum and gravity to bring the sword down forcefully. In the end, Lacri concluded that he had learned a lot from Bibia's gravity-defying technique. Lacri was still in a praising mood, but inwardly Bibia couldn't believe that his disciple could see through a technique that even Bibia himself hadn't realized he was using. If Lacri had been faster, Bibia's attack might have missed. Elga remarked that Lacri's defensive ability was truly impressive, and Purara and Delia started to worry, wondering how Lacri could see through Bibia's technique. They began to panic, especially Delia, thinking that if Lacri had such insight and defensive skill, she could easily be replaced, and Bibia would be next. Purara realized that Lacri had used magic to aid his movements in battle, and under the right circumstances, she could also be replaced. Even Elga felt threatened, seeing that Lacri was also skilled in defense. The party members began to feel so threatened that they wanted to get rid of Lacri. Bibia noticed this anxiety and seized the opportunity to ask everyone to join the fight, hiding his malicious intent under the guise of wanting to see Lacri's true strength. Was he strong enough to be part of the hero's party? They beat Lacri down, after which Bibia turned him into an errand boy for the party. Lorelei reprimanded Bibia, but as usual, her words had no effect. Lacri admitted that he knew he was weak and had only recently been chosen to wield the holy sword, meaning he was still an amateur warrior. Lorelei tried to argue otherwise, but the criticism from the others drowned her out. Bibia even went so far as to say that Lacri's sword was just a useless accessory, and the boy tried to defend himself. Finally, Bibia declared that he didn't need such a defiant and worthless person, and kicked Lacri out of the party. Lacri ran into the forest feeling disappointed and defeated. Unaware that she had wandered into the territory of some thugs, Lacri was quickly cornered by them as they demanded her expensive sword. She started backing away and fell off a cliff. Though injured, Lacri quickly reasoned that she needed to get out of there, as she might have entered enemy territory. Luckily, she had some recovery potions that Basta had prepared to heal her wounds and help her keep moving. Chased by mountain bandits through their own territory, the situation seemed hopeless for someone like Lacri. But she refused to go down without a fight. The bandits were hot on her trail, but admitted that Lacri was surprisingly agile for someone who was injured. She hid, but could still hear their voices, and hated how careless she'd been to run into bandits right after finding the village. She was exhausted and dizzy from the pain of the fall, and had only a single recovery potion left to use. Lacri could hear more bandits approaching, and realized she had to recover quickly. But before she could gather her thoughts, one of the bandits spotted her and took a keen interest in her beautiful sword. The bandit called to his comrades, warning them that Lacri was agile, and that fighting from a distance could be dangerous. He told them to surround her so she'd have no escape. They appeared in force, 30 men against one young girl, and it seemed Lacri didn't stand a chance. This is when the truth was revealed. Lacri was, in fact, a girl. The wielder of the holy sword is chosen from the Kelberg clan, and this is a great honor. Lacri had been chosen over her brothers, but her father believed that only a man was capable of wielding the sword. So, from the day Lacri was chosen, she began to be treated as a boy. They cut her hair, and her dresses were replaced with armor. Still, it was a proud moment for Lacri, the youngest daughter of the family. As the bandits closed in, she promised herself she wouldn't let them take her beloved sword. If they wanted it that badly, they'd have to take it over her dead body. Lacri prepared for the confrontation. Her strategy was to block their attacks if possible. And if not, she would avoid letting them cut too deep. As long as she avoided any fatal wounds, she would be fine. She targeted the bandit leader, hoping to use him as a human shield. However, Lacri's efforts quickly became hopeless as she was overpowered, and her sword was about to be taken. One of the bandits said she fought well, but it was time for them to leave. Just then, an unexpected hero appeared, sending the bandits flying. He retrieved Lacri's sword without the bandits even noticing until it was too late. Lacri stared in astonishment at her savior. He offered her a hand to help her up, then introduced himself as Ariake. He asked for her name, and she gave it. He then told her she could explain her predicament later, and that the antidote he'd given her had taken effect, so she should be able to move again soon. Lacri wondered when he had given her the antidote. Suddenly, a bandit lunged to grab the sword, but Ariake quickly took him down, punching him so hard that the bandit flew right into his comrades with a loud crash. Lacri was amazed by the force of the punch, which seemed to have the strength of 10 men. She asked if he had used multiple skills at once, and Ariake admitted that he had, wondering how she could have noticed. However, it wasn't over yet. Another bandit grabbed Lakri and held her hostage, threatening to kill her if Ariaki moved. Lakri felt pathetic, thinking that Ariaki had saved her, only for her to get captured again. Ariaki put two and two together, and quickly realized that Lakri had a slow motion skill that allowed her to see enemy attacks in slow motion. That's why she was able to tell that he had actually struck 10 times with a single blow. Ariaki told her to focus on her skill. At first it was a challenge, but as she refocused, she broke free from the bandit and retrieved her sword. She excitedly told Ariaki that it felt like the bandit was moving in slow motion, and asked if her victory was thanks to his help. Ariaki told her she had just discovered a new power that worked through her eyes. She just needed to follow the enemy's movements with her sword when defending or dodging. The bandits continued their attack. But Lakri followed Ariaki's advice, focusing and seeing the enemy's movements slow down. Thanks to this, she was able to move with precision and decapitate the bandit leader. The remaining bandits panicked and fled, but Ariaki told Lakri that he had already set a trap to catch them all. His mission was to eliminate the bandits, and it was easier to corner them all in one place, rather than let them scatter. He apologized for unintentionally dragging her into his mission, but Lakri was too captivated by the outcome of their encounter. Ariaki had introduced Lakri to her own hidden power and taught her how to use it. She secretly wished she could become his disciple. The two were served a lavish feast, making one wonder what the occasion was. The waiter explained that the feast was a token of gratitude for them having dealt with the bandits. Lakri commented on the excessive amount of food, but Ariaki just asked for 5 more servings of grilled meat. The waiter joked that it was like a scene from Oliver Twist. Surprised, Lakri asked if he really needed that much food. Ariaki explained that he had friends coming later, which was why he needed more food. Lakri was in awe of companions with such appetites, saying how amazing they must be. As they continued their conversation, Lakri updated Ariaki on the risks and difficult circumstances she had been through. Ariaki now knew that Lakri had also been kicked out of the hero's party. This surprised Lakri, learning that Ariaki had also been kicked out, as she couldn't fathom why someone as extraordinary as him would end up in such a situation. Meanwhile, she saw herself as just a talentless person who deserved to be thrown out of the party. Ariaki asked if she truly believed she had no talent, and Lakri confirmed it, explaining that was how the other party members treated her. She insisted they were right because she couldn't prove otherwise. Even when she was in the mountains and the bandits came, she only survived because Ariaki showed up at the right moment. Lakri concluded that being chosen by the sword didn't automatically mean she would become skilled. Ariaki told her that wielding a sword requires real skill, and that the sword itself means nothing without ability. He mentioned that when he first took her hand, he was surprised that despite her slender frame, her hands were covered in calluses. He encouraged her, saying it was proof of her hard work. Lakri tried to make up for her lack of experience. She took Ariaki's hand and said that she was trying, which was wonderful, and that she never backed down from a fight, which was also impressive. Even when surrounded by bandits and taken hostage, she stood her ground. She chose to trust him and fight. Her resilience was the mark of an ultimate warrior. Ariaki continued to question why she felt useless when she clearly wasn't. Lakri burst into tears, thinking of the weakness that had haunted her for so long. She remembered the whispers all around her, everyone commenting on how she was too weak for a chosen one, and how she had no special skills. Despite being forced to fight alone, rejected, and scorned by everyone, she still decided to follow her path without regret. She had been desperate to become stronger, and then Ariaki appeared, acknowledging her efforts. He called her a warrior, and that proved that all her efforts had never been in vain. Lakri continued to cry, expressing her deep gratitude for Ariaki's kindness. He gently told her that it was too soon to be crying, because she still had so much potential that he needed to help her unlock. Ariaki mentioned how she had used her ability to realize that he had combined multiple skills in his punch, specifically a 10-in-1. Lakri gave a wry smile, dismissing it as nothing, claiming she only noticed because of her slightly better kinetic vision. She felt it was meaningless, especially when she remembered the helplessness she felt when the other party members, led by Babia, had attacked her before. Their attacks and bullying were what made her flee into the mountains in the first place. Ariaki asked for more details about Babia's attack, and Lakri recounted how Babia moved and struck as if he were performing a dance. He used the momentum of his first strike to follow up with a diagonal slash. Ariaki immediately recognized it as the Lorendemir Waltz. This reminded Lakri that, Ariaki had once been a member of a hero's party, The Lorndemir waltz was clearly a complex, high-speed skill that an ordinary person would find difficult to comprehend. However, Lacri was no ordinary person, because she was able to grasp it after seeing it just once. Their conversation was interrupted by the cheerful and excited arrival of Colette. She was always clinging to Ariaki, so it was strange for her to have been gone even for a short while. She began by apologizing for being away from Ariake for so long, but she reassured him that there was no need to worry because she was back now. The moment she saw Lacri, Colette shouted, "Who's this?" Lacri remained polite, introducing herself, and Ariaki helped by explaining that Lacri had helped him take down the mountain bandits. Lacri humbly said that it was Ariaka who had saved her life. Colette, despite being gone only a short time, seemed impressed to learn that her master had been busy playing the hero in her absence. However, Colette's jealousy flared up as she grew suspicious of the admiration Lacri had for Ariake. She began to introduce herself, but was cut off by the waiter bringing the 5 servings of grilled meat that Ariaki had ordered. Colette's attention immediately shifted to the food that Ariaki had ordered just for her, and she began to eat voraciously. Lacri couldn't help but comment on how cute and energetic Colette was. After the meal, Ariaki told the 2 girls that they needed to pick up where they left off. Lacri agreed, but she didn't understand why they had to go this far. Colette was full and getting sleepy, but was still curious about what they would do next. Ariake updated Colette on Lacri, explaining that they were here to test her abilities. Ariaki expressed his eagerness to witness Lacri's abilities firsthand and asked her for a demonstration. Lacri was a little embarrassed by how eager Ariaki was to see her use a spear, but she announced she would demonstrate some basic combat moves. However, Ariaki cut in, saying what he really wanted to see was the Lorndemir waltz, a skill she had only seen once but had quickly memorized. Ariaki asked Colette to be Lacri's sparring partner, and Colette agreed. But she was skeptical that Lacri could replicate a skill she'd only seen once. She thought it seemed reckless. Lacri explained that she could handle the task just fine with her spear, but Colette remained doubtful. Lacri sprang into action, with the sounds of clashes and swirling wind, and finally she collapsed, complaining that she couldn't keep up with Colette's speed. However, Ariaki told her she did great, since Babia had practiced that skill for years, and for Lacri to replicate it like that was an impressive feat. Watching Lacri during this, Ariaki realized she had another special ability called Mirrored Mastery. This ability allowed her to grasp the habits and movements of others, learning both offensive and defensive techniques just by watching. In other words, Lacri was very good at copying other people's skills. Colette remarked that Lacri was just good at copying, but Ariaki countered, saying that wasn't the whole story. With this ability, Lacri could easily find weaknesses or openings in an opponent's technique and come up with the perfect countermeasure. In other words, once she's seen an attack, she'll never lose to it again. This revelation made Lacri realize that she was actually very good at dodging and defensive maneuvers. Her body instinctively reacted to copy movements, thanks to her kinetic vision. Although she might seem weak if she didn't know how to use her ability to attack, if she harnessed this skill well, she would become a formidable warrior. Lacri realized she needed to incorporate her instinctive defensive abilities into her attacks. If her body could instinctively dodge, then it could also learn to attack, though it would require time and serious training. With deep gratitude, Lacri bowed to Ariaki, expressing that she had felt lost after being abandoned by the hero's party, but Ariaki had become her motivation to get stronger. She promised to do her best to achieve that. Ariaka smiled and praised her spirit. Then he offered her a spot in his party. Colette was excited by the idea of having a divine weapon on their side, as it would surely be useful in upcoming battles. Plus, Colette looked forward to friendly competitions with Lacri to help each other grow. Lacri was thrilled and asked if this invitation meant she would become Ariake's disciple. Ariake laughed and reminded her that he was retired. But if she really wanted it, he would agree, especially since she was the wielder of a divine sword. Now that she was his disciple, Lacri would need to undergo training to get started. She needed to master her mirrored mastery skill. Ariaki remarked that Lacri's progress on the mountain was admirable, and there was no better way to train than through actual combat. This led to Ariaki inviting Lacri to join them in the upcoming royal duel, a perfect opportunity for her to train and prove her abilities.